This story is about my experience on the REZ, and this happened while traveling. It's about the floating trench coat man. That's what we call him in my tribe. Have you heard about him? It happened after we went to go see an indigenous doctor down in Montana. My family is very rooted in our traditions and teachings. We believe in medicine, in dreams, in signs, in the spirits. We were all taught to listen to our elders, especially when they speak. This all came down from my grandparents. Whenever they spoke, you listened. So on this night, we were driving back home to British Columbia. It was about 1 in the morning, and we had already crossed back into Canada. It was me, my mom, my cousin, my uncle, and my grandma. We were all packed in the car. We were talking, telling stories, singing songs, and just talking about what the doctor had said. My grandma was asleep in the front passenger seat. She was all bundled up. I say she was asleep because she hadn't said anything for like the last hour. Then, out of nowhere, she sits up, almost like something had woken her, and she just says, "Don't pick up that guy in the trench coat walking." And then she just sits back down. We all looked around like, what guy? There was no one else on the road. Not a single car. Nobody. It was just us. I remember sort of laughing, almost joking. I was like, "Alright, Grandma, you're dreaming again." But when I looked around, nobody else was smirking or laughing. Nobody. Everybody was just quiet. I guess they were taking it seriously. So I just stayed quiet about it. Didn't make another joke or anything. I actually felt a little weird after that. Anyways, about 15 minutes later, there was a man walking with his back to us in a black trench coat. We were the only people on the highway at this time, and my mom and I were like, "Hey, it's that guy." And then I made a joke about it again. I remember leaning over to the window to get a closer look, and that's when my grandma suddenly said, "Don't look at him." I guess she was awake. And I shit you not, it was too late. When I looked at his feet, he was floating, or something. I remember feeling a little shaky, and then felt like I was gonna puke. My grandma told us to look away, and to not talk about him, and to pray. I remember nobody else said anything. My grandma just kept telling us to pray. All I know is that my mom and I were the only ones to see him straight on. My cousin and uncle didn't see him, only through their side view. The rest of the drive was just quiet, pretty awkward. Nobody said anything else for like the next 30 minutes or so. And after we finally got home, nobody said anything else. Me and my family never brought this up again, but I heard one of your stories and wanted to share my personal experience with him. Now that I think about it, I'm not sure if I should even be talking about this. Nothing happened, nor did I see him again, but I heard it just happened so random. Maybe I should reach out to my grandma, or even to my own mom. Maybe they will tell me something now that time has passed. Has anybody experienced anything like this on the road? Let me know what you all think I should do. Thanks. Have you ever heard a woman crying in the middle of the night, far away, like distant? Some people say it's an owl, a deer, a spirit, maybe a skinwalker, maybe. I know every tribe has its own teaching about animals, especially when it comes to deer, owls, coyotes, or even certain birds, dogs. Apparently they carry messages and warnings, sometimes even testing people. If you shoot them and they don't die, or if they act strange, it's a sign that you encounter something else. What about your family or your tribe? What were you told not to mess with? I grew up in South Dakota, along the Grand River. My mom always told the stories we all hear growing up on the REZ, but I think something that a lot of people don't seem to know about are the black-tailed deer. One of the things she told us is that we could go hunting, but never to kill a black-tailed deer. She told us a story about some hunters who saw a huge black-tailed deer and shot it. When they went to go skin it, it had turned into a man when it died. My personal encounter was a few years back. I was working with my dad and we went to go check on some cows. We drove along the riverbed and off towards a ravine. There was a clearing at the bottom of the ravine where the grass was about ankle deep and it was surrounded by trees. It was towards sunset and it was very beautiful. There in the clearing was a very large buck. He didn't get startled by our presence and it was eating the grass. He looked up at us and it just kept eating. My dad was always ready to bring some meat home, so he reached down and got his rifle out. He loaded the rifle and drove us a little closer to the deer. The deer again looked at us, but it still wasn't alarmed. My dad stopped the truck and opened his door. He got out and aimed at the buck. We were so close that we could hear him chewing the grass. My dad was a deadly shot, and he took aim and shot the deer. We heard the snap as the bullet struck the deer. The deer looked up at us and just moved his tail a bit, and he kept eating. My dad then walked around to the front of the truck, aimed again, and shot. We heard the bullet pop when it hit the buck, but again, he just shook his tail and continued eating. My dad said, "What the hell? I know I hit him." At this point, almost like it heard my dad say something, the deer looked at us, and it turned to walk away. When it did, my dad's whole demeanor just changed. He said, "Get inside and let's go." So I did. As we were driving away, he said not to worry, that the deer is not gonna die. I asked why does he say this, and he said that it was a black-tailed deer, but he didn't know it was. That is, until it turned to walk away. There were a few other instances that my mom told us about them deer. I can't remember much of how the stories go, but the one that always freaks me out is when she was younger, staying at her uncle's house with her cousins. She said her uncle went out hunting and brought a few of them back. He must have not known about the black-tailed ones, because apparently he strung them up in his backyard and left them hanging overnight. Now my mom said that the land that her uncle had was pretty big, and it was surrounded by trees and forest. That night, my mom said that her and her cousins were all trying to go to sleep. Now remember, the whole family was over. Everyone had their own room except for all the younger ones. She said at some point throughout the night, they all woke up to the sound of a woman crying far away. The crying was getting louder, so they all went to look out the window in the room. It was coming from behind the property. When they looked around, there was a figure standing in the distance, far out in the tree line. A black silhouette. It just kept moving. She said it was weird because no dogs were barking. My mom and the rest of the teenagers just stood there watching her. It was kind of creepy the way she described it. This figure, lady, whatever it was, she said you couldn't see her feet. It was like she was just floating. As they were looking, their bedroom door suddenly slammed open so loud that they all screamed. It was her uncle and aunt. They rushed in and told everyone to get away from the window, close the curtains, and go to sleep. My mom said that she also noticed some kind of fine powder that her uncle sprinkled along the base of the window, and they didn't explain anything. They did listen, but my mom said that they all had trouble sleeping. She said everyone stayed up because they kept hearing knocking on the door and tapping on the windows, like fingernails. The next morning, everything changed. Nobody said anything about last night. She said the energy in the house was just off. Her uncle and aunt seemed tired, and everyone avoided the windows as well. After breakfast, everyone's parents showed up. Apparently, uncle and auntie had called all the parents to come pick everyone up, even though they always spent more than just a few days there. After my mom and the rest of the family left, she said her uncle started acting strange. According to what her mom eventually told her, uncle wouldn't eat, wouldn't talk much, and that night, he kept hearing a woman whispering outside his window. My mom said that he even covered the windows with blankets and moved his bed to the living room, just so that he didn't have to see outside. My mom said that the next day he went to a local medicine man. He brought tobacco, but the medicine man didn't even let him inside. He stood in the doorway and told him, "You knew better, and now your whole family has seen her. That wasn't just a deer. You disrespected something you knew about." The medicine man didn't even take the offering, the tobacco. He just said, "It's not me you should be making an offering to. You were lucky this time. Burn the meat, bury the hides past the tree line, and pray to Creator that He helps you." Later that night, her uncle burned the meat. He buried the hides past the tree line, and he never saw her again. And even after that, he never went hunting deer again. I never believed in the afterlife, paranormal, or any kind of religion. However, I was always open-minded. If someone were to tell me about an experience, I would listen and respect your view. But I'm one of those people who's got to see it to believe it. But what I'm going to tell you is the very reason for my sudden shift and transition, turning me into a believer. I live in Florida, and I was 17 at this time. This was during the cold month of July. Florida in July meant that it would be raining for the next few months. My friends and I would hang out outside, being adventurous and getting into trouble. I pride myself with the belief that I'm a good guy. I received good grades and behaved myself for the most part. But my friend Dylan, he isn't the best influence on me. And we're always together. Like, always. I guess this might give you a better picture of what type of person Dylan was. Well, his parents kicked him out, and he was living with us for a while. I didn't mind it. He was one of my best friends. If it wasn't for him, I would be the same shy kid who kept to himself and never left the house. My parents, however, they didn't see him in the same light, but they didn't have the heart to see him roaming the streets by himself. It was kind of complicated. My parents were good people, and they also knew him since he was little, so they had a soft spot for him. Plus, I think as you grow and mature, you see things differently, and you try your best to help others around you. So my parents were gone, and it was me, Dylan, and Dylan's friend, Cameron. We were all sitting inside, watching a scary ghost hunting show. I didn't know Cameron that well, but he seemed like a pretty good guy. Dylan is the one who would invite him, since, he lived with me. Cameron got up to use the bathroom, and that's when Dylan told me about this incredible idea that he had. He said that Cameron scares easy. After all, he's one of those people who jump at any noise and would get startled by you coming up behind them, saying hi or anything. Except, it wasn't so incredible. I thought it was about like scaring him when he comes back from the bathroom or something. But this dude had one of the craziest ideas. He said that he knew of this place that's supposedly abandoned and creepy as hell. He claimed that he checked it out before with some of his friends, and that it's safe. He said that we should all go there and give Cameron a good scare. I told him it was raining outside, but he's very convincing. Or maybe I was just peer pressure, but he said that I couldn't be scared of a little bit of rain. And well, basically, when Cameron came out the bathroom, Dylan told him all about it, except he didn't mention that it was creepy and abandoned, and instead he just said, "It's a cool hangout spot where we can do anything we want, including smoke some pot." Cameron basically said, "Sounds good to me." I had a moment to myself where I was like, fuck, if only he would have said no. We could have still been in the comfort of my home. It was getting a bit dark. Walking through the sidewalk, having huge pools of water splashed at us from one side of the road as cars passed by. At this point I was a bit irritated. I was completely soaked and I felt like I was carrying 20 extra pounds of weight. I'm a pretty small guy, and I really didn't work out. I remember asking Dylan if we were almost there. He then said, "Yeah, we're actually here." And he just runs across the street like a maniac. And he stops at this horrendous looking tree line, gated off by some fencing. "Over here." Me and Cameron looked at each other and gave one another the same look. We waited for any cars that were going by. Then we crossed. The first thing I noticed was the huge sign smack dab on the center of the gate that said, "No trespassing." I looked around some more at my surroundings. The trees had me feeling queasy. It looked like something straight out of a horror film. At this point it was raining, and I couldn't see very far. It gave the illusion that there was an infinite amount of trees blending in. I then told Dylan, "Please don't tell me we gotta go in there." He never said anything about the woods. Dylan then responded, "It'll be fun. Nobody will see us. And this way we won't leave your parents' home smelling like weed. We had to climb over the fence to get inside. I know we shouldn't have gone in there. All of this to smoke some weed, huh? Was it worth it? I guess you'll see after I tell you what happens." As we walked, Dylan said that the place was just down this awful looking stretch. The entire walk through the trail was so scary because by now it was dark. Not like completely dark, but the trees made it seem like it was midnight, even though I think it was around like 9 p.m. As we walked, I kept hearing some weird ass noises. The whole time getting here was just the sound of the rain, the wind, the cars, and water. But these other noises out here, it reminded me a lot of that movie Predator, where the crew is walking through the woods and they keep hearing noises. Dylan was the one leading. I followed behind him and Cameron was behind me. We had to walk this way because the trail was extremely narrow now, and just when you think it couldn't get worse. But it did. The trail was dirt, but now it was mud. My shoes started sinking into the soil, and I had to fight every step of the way to dig them out. Also, one of the weird noises that had me anxious was coming from behind Cameron. I looked back a few times every time that I heard it, and I would ask Cameron if he was alright. I know at this point I was freaked out, so I can only imagine how he felt. Cameron looked like the sound didn't bother him, or maybe Dylan never told me that Cameron was half deaf, because it was so loud. It sounded almost like we had another person walking behind us. I swear it sounded like either Cameron had 4 feet, or someone else was behind him. But like I said, every time that I asked him if he was alright, he acted like nothing. I think he was just trying to seem brave. The other noises I was hearing came from the sides of the woods. It was like whistling, but maybe it was the wind. I gained some comfort when I looked ahead and saw the tree line. We all picked up the pace and made our way towards it. The bunkhouse was actually a lot bigger than it appeared from a distance. It was super old and grainy. There was one of those huge dumpster bins resting against the front left side on the outside wall. I'm not sure what was inside of it, but it did smell really bad. I took a guess that maybe someone was sleeping here during the nights. Some of the wooden beams that were supposed to be holding the property up were hanging. It looked like a suicide mission. The inside of the bunkhouse was pitch black, but I could see on the door frames that a mossy plantation was taking over the building. At this time the rain had died down, and I was able to look up at the building more without being struck by rain in the face. Some points in the roof had been chipped away, creating some small holes for the rain to sink into the wood panels. I started to get this fear of this building coming down on us, but if you saw the state of it, you would understand. Cameron, finally with the words of wisdom, he said, "I'm not going in there. It looks like a damn witch house." But Dylan just told him that he's been here before. I know how it looks, but I've been here before a few times. It's just abandoned. You think other people would actually walk in the rain to get here? They don't even know about it. It's just go inside and get out of the rain and smoke. Cameron went back and forth with Dylan, but like me, Cameron finally gave in. And surprisingly, he was the first one to enter. And then it was Dylan. Then I went in. It was massive inside, and dark. There was just enough light coming in from the ceiling to see what was going on. It wasn't your typical bunkhouse. Normally inside of one, there's beds along both sides of the walls. But this place seemed to have a few rooms, like a mini hotel. Dylan then took us to the furthest room. Well, the hall was super narrow. Only one person fit through it. As Dylan went inside, me and Cameron just waited in the, in the lobby. We then heard Dylan, "Alright, come through." As I started walking, I heard the sound of footsteps coming up from behind us. It sounded like someone was coming down the way we came in. Keep in mind, it's pretty dark now, and the only light is from the moon itself. So when we heard the footsteps and turned around, Cameron screamed and started pushing me, telling me to hurry the fuck up and get into the room. I was scared too, but I felt like Dylan was maybe messing with us. Maybe he was trying to scare Cameron. Maybe he went around somehow. But when we got into the room, Dylan was there, looking surprised, saying what the heck was going on. When Cameron made it, he was looking scared, and he said, "I want to go back. This place is some freaky shit." Dylan apparently found it amusing. He started laughing while trying to flick the light switch on the room. "Sometimes some animals come in here," he said. Cameron then said that was no fucking animal. I told Dylan that I also heard it. It sounded like someone else was behind us, but he just stood there ignoring us, flicking it on and off. His stupid grin went away when he said, "This light was working when I came here last time. I can't see shit." He started reaching into his pocket. The room that we were in was very dark, and it only had one bed and a window. At this point, I'm starting to question myself, how I agreed to come out here. That's when I finally built the courage, whatever you want to call it, and told Dylan, "I don't want to be here, and Cameron sure as hell doesn't either. Why don't we just..." I heard a loud bang coming from the lobby, down the hall that we had just came down from. Cameron was jittering in place at this point. He was like, "Oh my god." Even Dylan showed some fear by saying, "Dude, what the fuck was that?" As for myself, I thought it was one of the wooden beams giving way. Dylan's hand came out from his pocket, gripping one of those small flashlights. It was really dark, but my eyes adjusted a bit. Dylan shined the flashlight into the main lobby, lighting up the hall that we had just came through. When he did, all of us, including Cameron, we all saw a black figure move across the lobby, from left to right. "Turn the fucking light off," Cameron said. We all backed up towards the window. Dylan placed his hand over the light. The room was dark again. This time my eyes were a little blurry from the quick flash. They had to refocus. I couldn't see anything at this point. "What the fuck was that?" Dylan said. "Maybe it was some hobo or some homeless guy." Cameron was stuttering at this point, and jittering, shaking, all of the above. He said that was no person. "Did you see the shape?" I guess we all saw something different, but we knew it was some sort of shadow or something. Dylan then said, "Let's get out of here." And he looked towards the screen window of the room. "Let's go through here." Maybe it was the adrenaline or something turned on inside Cameron, but he ripped open the screen window and he said, "Let's go." When he did, that's when we heard it. The light switch. It was flicking on and off. The one inside the room that we were in. Cameron and Dylan were standing right beside me. I freaked out at this point. White noise started to fill my ears, along with the flickering sound of the light switch. It was increasing in speed. Cameron started saying, "Let's go." I'm not sure why. I know why he did it. Dylan removed his hand from the flashlight and shined it at where the light switch was at. When the light hit the wall of the light switch, we could see that no one was standing there, but the light switch was still flickering. At this point, Cameron is already outside, as he had gone through the window, because I know Dylan was now climbing through the window as well. He just kept saying, "Run, run." I felt like I was being held in place. It was a weird feeling. The flickering of the light switch stopped. I thought my heart did too, because that's when I heard a set of footsteps walking towards me. That's when I turned around and started to climb out the window. The top half of my body was hanging out the window, and everything below my waist was still hanging inside the room. I could see Dylan and Cameron miles ahead. These fuckers had left me. Maybe they thought I was behind them, but they didn't even look back. A chill went up my spine at the thought of this person, thing, whatever was here, grabbing a hold of me. I started kicking my legs, trying to wiggle myself over the window, and sure enough, that's when I felt a cold hand grab my ankle, and it stopped me from kicking. I pushed away with both of my legs, falling head first into the mud. I got up and ran like my life depended on it, and eventually, I caught up to Dylan and Cameron a few minutes away running through the trees. I wasn't even mad at them for leaving me. My hands were shaking all over as we made it back to my parents' home, but nobody believed us. The next day, Dylan was acting weird. He wouldn't joke about what happened. He wouldn't even talk about it. But what freaked me out more was Cameron. He stopped hanging out with us. He kind of distanced himself from us. I don't blame him. Dylan, eventually, as much grace and compassion my parents showed him, he started developing some pretty bad habits. And I think in about a week after this happened, he ended up moving back to his parents' home. I couldn't stop thinking about that place though, so I looked it up online. I tried to figure out what exactly it was. I pulled up some old maps, satellite images on Google. It took a while, but I did find something. It turns out that building, that bunkhouse, the one that Dylan thought was some chill abandoned hangout spot to smoke weed, apparently it used to be part of a state-run facility back in the 50s. Officially it was labeled as a temporary housing for migrant workers, but then I found a YouTube video of a guy who goes around exploring abandoned buildings. I don't know how true it was, but maybe they had better resources. As he was doing the vlog, he said it was actually a containment site for people, runaways, kids with behavior issues. He also said there were rumors about experiments, abuse, even a few disappearances. I remember somebody commenting on the video saying that the place was shut down after too many went missing and the building was just left to rot. But the scary part, I found another comment where somebody said that they went there one time. They described the layout, the lobby, the rooms, exactly how I saw it. And this person said that they saw shadows and also heard some noises, like some tapping. Maybe it was the same noise that we heard. I'm not sure. Like I said, I didn't believe in the paranormal, but I know what I saw. Even now, when I go to sleep, I imagine that light switch sound, flickering, turning on and off. I just hope that you don't hear it. Did you know that you can pick up spirits on the road without even stopping? Out here on the REZ at night, it doesn't take much. You don't even have to stop. You don't even have to talk to anyone. And I'm not talking about hitchhikers or taking the wrong turn. The creepiest part of everything is that you won't even know it happened until you're home, until the dogs start acting weird, until the knocks come at night, or when you hear something whispering your name from a dark window. I know some of us are more sensitive to this kind of stuff. Curiosity sometimes feels harmless, but out here, curiosity is just another way of leaving the door cracked open for something to come in. So I'll go up to the REZ for Easter to spend time with my family. It was me, my daughter and husband, and we decided to go to the casino. It was around 1 in the morning, and we got to 17 Mile and Yellow Calf Road, and when we turned it sounded like our tailgate fell down on the truck. I told my husband to pull over, but my daughter said she heard something in the back, unless it was the music that was on. Now mind you, my daughter is not 8, 12, 15. No, she's actually 21. So I know she was being serious too and not one to joke with. My husband didn't feel right about this. So we drove a little bit more and I burned some sweetgrass and told him to pull over so that we could close the tailgate. We eventually pulled over and me and my husband got out to close the gate. But when we got in the back of the truck, the gate was closed. We looked at each other confused until we quickly got back inside of the truck. and we didn't even say anything to each other, nor to my daughter. We drove with the lights on. It's kind of funny looking back now, how fast we ran back inside the truck. But anyways, we get to the casino and lost our money as always, and we just went home. Now, once we were home, which was about 3 a.m., we all went to lay down. Then the dog started to cry, and it sounded like someone was whispering in the window. After a few minutes it got quiet, but then came the 3 knocks. I got chills, because I was wondering who would come around that late. So I just yelled at them to go away. The next night around the same time, the same thing happened again. The dog started crying, and the knocks and the whispers happened. Except this time something else happened. Something kept hitting the wall, and the dogs kept crying, even yelping till the sun came up. That's pretty much it, but that's the point that I'm trying to tell you. Since we've been back, some other crazy and weird things been happening. Like we hear people talking when only one of us is at home, and sometimes the doors just open and close. We also sometimes hear someone calling out to one of us when only one of us is at home. What do you all think? Maybe we picked up an extra passenger from the casino or something, unless it was from the road that we took when we heard our tailgate open. What do you all think? Years ago, my dad used to work at a place in Tuba City, Arizona. It was called the Recovery Center, a place for counseling, getting over addiction and all that stuff. It was an old building, made of large brick rocks and the wooden floors creaked. It had a moldy smell to it. There were a few rooms throughout the building, which were offices, and it even had a basement, which was accessed from the outside through steps that led down there. This was back in the 80s. I guess in the 50s and 60s it used to be a hospital, and the basement was used as a morgue and a hospice area. So we used to stay the nights there on weekends as a family. We would watch movies and take showers there. We lived on the REZ at this time. There was no electricity and running water in the REZ that we stayed in. Well, at least back home. So when we spent the nights there, we took advantage. Can you blame us? Our dad was simply trying to help us get by. Now I want to tell you about a few creepy experiences that I had there. My dad would tell us that during the week when he would work, that him and his employees would hear strange noises, and sometimes even voices. He said that nobody liked going down to the basement, but they had to sometimes, because they used it as storage for files and archives, a bunch of furniture and some other things. Not to mention the lights were bad down there, string light bulbs hanging, and the actual floor down there was dirt. And whenever anyone went down there, everybody said they felt like somebody was watching them. My dad would say they would hear noises coming from below, and they would have to go look because sometimes the locals would break in and try to spend nights down there to stay warm. He said that one time during the day, mostly everyone left for lunch. Himself and some other guys stayed, and they were just sitting in the offices when they heard noises coming from the pool table that was down the hall in the rec room. They assumed that the others had came back, and they chose to start a game instead. They made their way down the hall to join the game, but when they got there, everything, including the pool balls, were all racked, even though they said that they heard noises like people were playing. Some other time they heard a lady screaming from the basement. They went down there, and there was nothing. The next time it happened, they ended up calling the police, and were in one of the offices talking about what they had been hearing. And just then, everybody heard the lady scream, so they ran outside to get to the basement. With the 2 officers that showed up, they got the door open. The officers then took a look inside. Again, nothing. After a while, my dad said that they started raking the floor in the basement. They did it to see if anyone would walk around down there. So after they started raking the dirt, they started to notice what looked like something being dragged along the floor. The next day, they started to notice what looked like something being dragged along the floor. Now back to when I was there on the weekends. We would never go near the basement door while playing outside. As a matter of fact, when we started staying there at first, I used to like it. But after a few weekends of hearing things, noises, and the stories from my dad, and even others, I didn't want to be there no more. Now the creepiest thing, or the final straw, was my last weekend there. We would all sleep at the end of the building. It had a huge open room, and I would always sleep next to the wall underneath the window. My parents would sleep on the opposite side of where I slept at. There was a tiny hole, maybe the size of a quarter in the floor. If you looked down there, you could see into the basement. So we would all dare each other to look down there. A few times when we did that, the lights would be on down there, and even then we would still look. And I swear, I saw a black shadow or something moving down there. I know you must be thinking that wasn't scary, but it really was to me. After that, I just ended up staying back home instead, as we ended up getting electricity and running water after a while. It was such a scary place to me. So I was happy when we moved and my dad got transferred, which means that we were not going to be going back there again. I'm not sure if that building is still standing, but I'll tell you this though. People say that these places are haunted, but in my tribe they teach us to avoid these sort of places. Hospitals, abandoned buildings, old boarding schools, basically all these places where people died. Some people say that you shouldn't sleep where somebody passed away, that basically you'll be hearing voices, or you'll feel like there's somebody's eyes on you. Basically it's your spirit sensing something that you can't see, that feeling in your stomach. That's what that is. So there's things out here that are not meant to be disturbed, and maybe that's what happened down there in the basement. My mother was driving, and I was in the front seat passenger. My little brother, his friend, and my son, who was only a year old in his car seat, was in the back. All the boys were asleep. We were driving home from Tuba City, Arizona. My brother played in the All-Star B-Ball game that evening in Tuba. I was talking to my mom, keeping her company, and at the same time I was thinking in my head, when is this road gonna end? Because it seemed so long and a little curvy. As we talked, my mom came to a curve again. She slowed down because of the curve. And then, all of a sudden, a cow was right there coming onto the road. I'm not sure about now, but back then there was no fencing to keep animals off the highway. My mom then suddenly slammed on her brakes because the cow was right in front of us. As we stopped, the cow looked back at us like it was freaked out. Then it took off like it was limping, but in a strange way. The car lights were on high beam. My mom and I looked at each other like, what the hell was that? My mom took off and told me not to look out the window. Her knuckles were so white. I could tell she was afraid, because we still had ways to go to get to Many Farms Junction. To this day, I will never drive through there that late again. I really do think that was a Skinwalker, but a cow. It looked weird. It looked like the skin was loose. My mom later on told me that she was scared. Her heart was beating so fast. She didn't want to make me more afraid, she said. From there, we still had ways to go, but we made it. And we just didn't think or say much about what we saw till the next day. It's very creepy, going through that part of the REZ that late. Anyways, even now remembering this, I'm getting shivers. I guess I ended up scaring myself by just remembering this. I don't think it was a Skinwalker that I came across, which is a person who practices bad medicine, or maybe it was. I'll let you decide after I tell you about my encounter. So my mom used to tell me that mirrors are not just for fixing your hair. They are actually windows. She told us growing up that they don't just show your reflection, they can trap things, reveal the truth, or even reflect things that don't belong in this world. That's why growing up, my mom only let us use the mirror when we would have to brush our hair or get ready. Then again, when have you ever known someone to use mirrors for something else, aside from those things? However, she always covered the mirrors at night, especially during ceremonies, or when someone passed away. You know how when you leave or go out, you make sure your doors are locked, or you make sure you have your wallet, your keys and stuff. I had covering mirrors in the house before we left on that list, especially when we would have ceremonies. I never quite understood what she meant, not until that day at the powwow, not until I saw something I wasn't supposed to see, I think. For those who might not know, a powwow is more than just a gathering. It's a celebration of our culture, the songs and the dances. Families come together, dancers wear regalia, you hear the drums, and our languages and traditions are kept alive. There are ceremonies, honor, and sometimes competition, but above everything else, it's where we all come together. Growing up very traditional came with knowing how to powwow dance. Well, learning. I went to powwow club, and I made a lot of friends that I still know today. As a kid, I was always shy and reserved, but I was always around watching and listening. Many of the people that were there at the club were younger back then, and today when I go there's only elders and grandparents. But that's alright, I have always loved dancing, and as I grew up, it was always the same crowds in surrounding areas, and even at the reserve powwows. As I grew older, I was always happy to see everyone in every season, new regalia and new dances. Now, there was always this one dancer who stayed in the same outfit for many years, and he was well known in the community. He was a very proud dancer as well. One day at a weekend-long powwow, I was with my family and my son who was small at that time. I was getting ready, and I had a mirror on me to fix my plumes and get my hair sprayed and everything else. I was looking in the mirror on the hood of the car, and I was trying to hurry as the grand entry was starting soon, and guess who I see? This longtime dancer there getting ready as well in the corner of the mirror. I could see him putting his stuff on and attaching strings to keep his stuff up, and I started thinking to myself, oh, he's rushing too, just like me. His back was facing me, but from the outfit I knew it was him. Then he turned around to his side, and I was still looking at myself in the mirror. However, when he did, what I saw shocked me to the core of my soul. Now I want to paint you the scene. It's daylight, there's people everywhere, laughing and socializing, and we could all hear the person saying that dancers needed to make their way to the harbor. But this dancer, as he turned, and I'm not sure how to describe it, but I will never forget that image. His head, his face, it wasn't human. There was no long gray hair, which he always had. There was no glasses on his face, and no wrinkled brown skin. There was nothing. There was only a skull, and it had flesh spots on it. It looked like a skull that was decomposing. I got goosebumps, and my son was sitting beside me, sitting on a chair, drinking from a sippy cup. I grabbed him and our stuff. This time I physically turned around and looked at the man again, and he looked normal. I didn't know what to do. I just panicked and went to sit with my family, and I didn't say anything. I kept my son close to me all day, and when I danced my category, I made sure my mom was holding him. Throughout the whole day I was just asking myself if I already saw that, or if I was just imagining. When the evening came for grand entry again, I was in line to enter the harbor, and I was in front of another dancer who happened to have a mirror. It was on her back. As we entered the harbor, I noticed that the dancer I saw earlier was behind us, just a few yards away. So when we lined up and stopped for the honor song, I tried to look in the mirror of the dancer in front of me to see where this guy was at. I saw him. He looked normal. As the rest of the day went on, I just avoided going around him. I did grow up learning that when we see stuff like this, that it's really not good. Now, it's been a while since I've seen this dancer, because I pulled away due to personal circumstances. But I do believe that I was shown a really evil side of this person that no one was seeing at this time because he was getting so much attention in the powwow community. I say this because of what happened down the road. The next few years, I started to hear that he's losing a lot of respect. I actually talked with a friend, and I started hearing things, little rumors here and there. Rumors that people no longer invite that dancer to their powwows. Some say they don't trust him anymore. Some say something's just off about him. And deep down, I knew it. I just knew it. I still go to some powwows, not always to dance, sometimes just to watch, support, and be there. But every now and then, he still shows up, still walks around, but something's different. His outfit has also changed. I'm not sure if he got into something dark. I believe he was either wrapped up in bad medicine, or he's starting to walk that path. And honestly, I think when I saw his reflection, or whatever that was, maybe I was seeing the spirit inside of him, starting to rot away. My son was around 2 when this happened. He's 11 now, so all of this happened in the span of 9 years. I'm not sure if anyone else has seen this at powwows or anywhere at traditional gatherings or ceremonies. I feel like sometimes when I think about it, no one would believe me. But what do you all think? Has anyone had any experiences like this? Or do y'all have an idea of what I saw? This is my first time telling the story. I felt like I had to get it off my back. At least somebody could hear it. This happened 2 years ago, and my parents own a cabin in North Saskatchewan. And yeah, I'm actually in North Canada. I decided I wanted to spend some time by myself up there. My parents agreed because they wanted me out of their attic. I've been really into the paranormal the past few months, so I found the idea of being by myself and isolated with whatever is out there in the North Forest pretty comforting. So I drive up there in late November. I stocked up on food to last a few months. I leave my phone at home since I only use it for internet related stuff anyways. The cabin has electricity and satellite but no internet, but all my video games are offline anyways, so it doesn't really matter. I bring a hunting rifle with me as well, obviously for hunting. The cabin has a basic layout with an extension added on when my sister and I were born. It was done to add extra room for us on vacations up here. It's mostly made out of wood except for the thin roof that's on the extension. When I show up, I unpack all my stuff and I just sit there and chill. The cabin is really close to a tree line. This is because the cabin was actually built on a very small clearing. Others would find this claustrophobic. I find it relaxful when it came to stuff like this. The first night I chill and listen to the sounds of the animals as I fall asleep. No TV, just relaxing and easing into my new environment. That's when I hear what sounds like a deer or a moose out in the distance. Anyways, the first day I get all my winter clothes on and head into the woods. I stay close by the trees where the snow was easy to walk through. I'm reminded of all the times I walked through these woods as a kid with family. I decided to get out further and I travel in parts that I'd never been before. Even when I was a kid, my parents would never tell us where we could and couldn't go. They just never got around it. I then hear that sound off in the distance, and I'm starting to think, maybe I can get up close and have a good look at it. Most of them are kind of dangerous up here since they're not familiar with people, but I figure I could climb a tree if it charges or something for some reason. I walk to where the noise was coming from, and the sound doesn't get any louder. I figure it must be walking away from me, but I also can't find any tracks. I decided that it's actually a lot further away than I thought it was, and I couldn't even chase after it if I wanted to. After only like 7 hours of daylight, I started to head back because I don't want to get caught out here in the darkness. It's not the kind of place you want to get lost in at any point. Once I get back home, I started to think about the whole thing. I do get a little bit creeped out, just the fact of being out here by myself, and so I just cook dinner and go to bed. The next day when I go outside for a walk, I find a rotting moose with all the skin on its head chewed off. I figure it was most likely maggots or other small animals picking away at it. At one point I tried to go hunting for deer or anything else, but I could never find tracks despite all the calls I heard at night. Mostly female, for some reason. I always told myself that they must be a lot further out than I usually venture to. But one day, I went out and actually managed to snag a small buck, and I'm thinking, yeah, this is what I came out here for. I had never shot one by myself before, so I had no idea how to take care of the meat. I decided to leave it till tomorrow and butcher it when I woke up. I went full dumbass mode and left it hanging outside as to not stink up the cabin. The next day, I went out and there were huge bites taken out of it. I'm thinking, oh great, some animals are in here now. Some animal got to it first and mangled it to pieces. Whatever it was already went at it on the head for some reason. I couldn't pick out what animal would have made the bite marks, but I decided to stop walking out so far into the woods for now. I even start to wonder how I even got a male buck if all the calls I heard were female. I know what the calls are, and these were more long, drawn out, indicating female. I started to get creeped out, since I do get anxious about random stuff anyways, but I quickly made myself forget about it, since I did promise myself that I would stay for the full few months and not go home early. The next night I couldn't sleep because of my anxious thoughts. You know how insomnia works and stuff. I began to hear a very slight noise. It was a very quiet night, so I would be able to hear something outside if anything was there, but I couldn't make out what it was. Eventually it got louder, as if the sound itself was frustrated. I realized something must be making it, so I sat up and listened to it, like something being scraped over the top of wood. The sound traveled all the way across the cabin past where I was sleeping, and into the extension and all the way around again. The second time it passed the extension, it stopped right where I was sitting on the bed for just a moment, and then it continued. This went on for a few minutes, but eventually it stopped, and then I simply just passed out. The next day I had to convince myself that what happened wasn't a dream. I began to brainstorm an idea about some intelligent animal. This can't just be a coincidence, I thought. In the middle of the day, I built the courage to go outside and see what happened. There were scratches on the snow-covered walls, not enough to wreck the wood, but enough to see a pattern of scratches that were made more than a few feet above the ground. This definitely wasn't just some dumb animal. I finally decided to take a look at my door. The scratches were serious on the wooden door, as if someone with big fingernails spent hours scraping at it. I started tripping balls on fear at this point. Whatever it was smart enough to tell that the door was the way inside, but obviously predatory. I came to the conclusion that whatever this was must have been the same thing that mauled the buck that I had caught. Finally decided to look at the footprints. The best way to describe them was like bare footprints, but really long. I know for a fact that whatever this was definitely not a bear. That's when I began to realize something. There were no footprints around the cabin, just the ones leading up to it and leaving. This thing must have been climbing around my walls, dragging its nails to create the scratches. This was definitely not a bear. I just wanted to get out of there at this point, but the sun started to go down and storm clouds started moving in. I had been out there for just 2 hours just looking at all this stuff. I couldn't leave in a blizzard or in the dark, so I just locked myself in and went to bed with my gun. My mind started racing when night hit. The wind was blowing outside, but off in the distance, I heard that same noise again. I began to put two and two together. Whatever this thing was, it was calling male animals by mimicking female mating calls. I know it preferred male animals since they had more meat. When I left that damn buck outside, it could tell that I was here. In fact, the first full day that I spent here when I was chasing that moose call, it could have been right above me in a tree or something. My train of thought was stopped when I heard that damn scratching noise again. I barely made it out because the blizzard was so loud, but I could still recognize it. Either it saw me as a rival or as prey. At this point, I'm not sure which was worse. I know this thing was good at climbing because I heard the sounds of feet on the wooden roof and very faintly on the snow. Suddenly, the sound changed to feet. It was right above me. I couldn't handle this anymore, but I know I couldn't leave because that's exactly what it wanted. The banging sounds on the thin roof went on for what felt like hours as the storm went on. Eventually it went away, and I thought, thank God. The blizzard began to die down too. I could hear better now, but I was not ready for what happened next. That's when I heard a woman's voice outside, not making any words, just babbling. I thought, fuck, this barefoot demon thing, it's trying to trick me like you did all those moose and deer. The sound was very close, at least within the tree line. I ended up grabbing a big ass flashlight and went to open one of the windows. I shined it outside towards where the sound was coming from. That's when I saw it. This ungodly 7-foot tall, slim, muscular build thing. My eyes eventually adjusted to what I was looking at. The face was a hideous interpretation of a human, almost like if you described to an alien what a person looked like, and then they fed the drawing to dogs. The nose was upturned like a bat, facing directly at me. Its eyes weren't sunken in like you would suspect. They were protruding out. The eyes looked almost swollen. Its mouth was round and way too big. The face was shaped like a baboon's face, very oval with a heavy brow ridge, but it was incredibly flat, and its forehead was big. It started moving its lips, almost like it was trying to talk, except all it looked like at this point seemed to be smiling at me. Its hands were a combination of sloth and human hands. In one of its hands, it held the head of a buck. All the skin had been chewed off of it. After getting a good look at it, I took a shot at it. I'm not sure if I hit it since I dropped the flashlight, but that's when I saw it drop the head and run off into the woods. I grabbed the flashlight and pointed to it, and I could barely make out a shape climbing a tree in seconds, and then jumping from one tree to another. Fuck you and this cabin. I ended up not sleeping the rest of the night, and I left in the morning. I came home early and told my parents I was feeling lonely as an excuse to come back. I never told them what happened because they would have assumed that I was taking drugs. Anyways, this is most likely the only time that I'll ever tell this story. I don't believe in magic or even in forest demons or anything like that. I'm not sure what I saw out there. I'm not gonna give it a stupid name like all you other guys do when they see something like this. But I know one thing's for sure. I'm never going back to North Saskatchewan as long as I live. I have a story to share, but I am gonna warn you. It contains some very uncomfortable details. It's a story that's been passed around a bunch of times. Maybe you heard it before, but I want to share it from the perspective of my mom. She said there was a little boy that lived with his grandparents in an area north of here. His grandfather would leave some nights saying that he would go to a family member's to play cards and to come back late in the night. The grandmother eventually got curious about these nights, especially because sometimes he wouldn't even come back till the next day. So she had the boy follow his grandfather just to see where he would go. Following his grandfather, they would pass the relative's home that he was supposedly playing cards in. Eventually they came to a canyon edge. The boy then saw his grandfather disappear down the canyon wall. Moving closer, he saw a very narrow path that would allow the person to walk down the canyon wall. Going down the path, he saw his grandfather taking his clothes off and leaving his clothes at the entrance. Creeping down, he came to a cave entrance that was covered by animal skins. Looking in, he saw his grandfather and his grandfather's family members, all naked, sitting around a fire, passing a bowl of some liquid around, and watching two people, doing it. He recognized one of them as his uncle, and the other being one of his own uncle's daughter. They ended up seeing him, and they dragged him in, and they placed him in some back room that looked to be used as storage. He saw some animal skins and bones with what looked to be the corpse of an infant. After a while, they had the boy join them, and they told him to undress and to, quote unquote, do it with one of his family members that was there. The boy noticed that they seemed to be under the influence of what was in the bowl, the one that they were passing around, and that they were also unsteady on their feet. That's when he chose that he was going to try to leave, and as he began to take his shirt off, just to deceive that he was going to stay and do as they asked. But when they let their guard down, he took off running as fast as he could. Some of them tried to follow him out, but they ended up falling down the canyon wall. Continuing to run, he eventually got back to his grandmother. Just before he approached the hogan, he saw a coyote wandering around the area, so he stopped and looked at it as it was digging a hole in the ground, and it dropped something in the hole, and then it just covered it. Seeing the coyote leave, he ran into the hogan and told his grandmother everything that he saw. She listened to everything that he said, so they drove away to go to a medicine man the grandmother knew of. They ended up conducting some sort of ceremony and singing. Then the medicine man had the boy say the name of each person that he saw in the cave. And he also told the grandmother that the bundle the boy saw, the one that the coyote buried, it actually contained some of her hair and other personal things. Eventually, every person that the boy named ended up dying. My mom used to finish this story telling me to never get involved with bad medicine. The land remembers everything, and it has history. That's why the elders taught us, before you build, before you move in, before you enter someone's home, before you even step foot on certain grounds, you should always pray. You should always ask for permission. Sometimes there are things still there, spirits that never leave, not in the walls, but in the land itself. Here in the Pine Ridge REZ, there's a school called Pahinsenteo, Iowa, that was open in 2008. If you live around here, you know about it, or you even heard stories about it. For those who are closer to my age, will know that the school was built to replace an older one. The older one was built back in the late 60s, or early 70s, and you also heard stories about it, shadow figures, a little girl, and also a bunch of other things. My dad was in actual security there in the late 80s, and he would tell me so many stories and encounters about this. He retired around the transition to the new school. It has kindergarten through 8th grade. It's a very new school, and you would think that it would not have anything wrong with it. Well, any bad history at that, or any bad energy. And whenever people would say this, I always remind them that the land it was built on was there way before the foundation was even built, even before the community of Porcupine existed. At first, nothing happened. All the stories of the dark shadows and things people had witnessed in the previous school didn't, quote-unquote, move with the school to the new facility, even though the old school playground and gym were less than 300 yards south of the new school. All of that didn't last very long. This story is one that my friend told me. He ended up taking my dad's old spot after he retired. Well, actually after they had a hard time keeping anyone there. People kept quitting, and that's when he stepped in. Like how all things begin, it started small. Some of the teachers said that they would hear footsteps, things would go missing, and then reappear in some other classroom. Eventually, the teachers stopped staying late, and they would leave as soon as they could. The women that would have to stay late or work longer hours would actually quit after a few weeks. Then security guards and janitors started doing the same. They would leave early or just quit. The HR manager was getting frustrated from having to hire janitors and different security guards every few months. The last security guard he hired before my friend told him why he was resigning. Keep in mind that my friend said that the HR manager was not a believer, as you will see. So when the security said why he was quitting, the HR manager just laughed about it. That's when he brought my friend on board, and he also brought a new janitor. He decided to be honest with them and told them why the previous people had quit. The new janitor didn't say anything, but my friend did tell him that such things do exist. However, he said it was most likely the building settling in its foundation. He said that he was a labor worker when it was being constructed, and that is what the engineers had said the building was going to do for a few years after it was completed. They said even though the ground was compacted, the weight of the building was going to put pressure on the ground, and it would eventually settle completely. The HR manager agreed with him and said to let him know if there were any issues. So he started the job, and for 2 weeks nothing happened. But after that, Monday morning rolled around, and my friend went into the HR manager's office. For the sake of this story, I will call my friend Donnie. Don't ask me why, but that's what I'm gonna call him. So Donnie was asking him who all had keys to the building. The HR manager said as far as he knew, the ones with keys were the principal, the janitor, some teachers whose classrooms were near the doors, as they were designated as fire exit, and also himself. He ended up asking Donnie why. Donnie told him that over the weekend, he was doing his checks when he saw a boy near the fire exit doors. He yelled out at him, but he took off running. Then he disappeared by the fire exit doors. So Donnie requested if he could remind the teachers near the doors to be sure that the doors were locked whenever they left on Friday. The HR manager said that he would remind them, and so Donnie got up to leave his office, not wanting to start an argument with the teachers about the doors. He asked if it was caught on the school cameras. Donnie then pulled out a little notebook from his pocket, and he gave him the time of when he saw the little boy. The HR manager told him that he would talk to the teachers and to the principal about it. Donnie said that the HR manager ended up talking with the principal, and he just shook his head. He said that before he puts a memo out to the teachers about what Donnie said, he wanted to see the security tape. They both ended up reviewing the security camera, and just like Donnie said, they could see that boy running around in the school, and as Donnie actually chased him, he disappeared by the exit doors. So a memo was put out to all the staff to make sure that the doors were locked, and to double check them before they went home. By now, Donnie knew that the message had been sent to everyone, so he figured this time there wouldn't be any more break-ins. Also, the story about the boy quickly circulated around the school, among the staff, and yes, even to the kids themselves. If you're a teacher at a school, then you know that nothing can stay hidden. So when Friday rolled around, all the teachers double-checked all the doors to make sure they were locked, and they all went home. The following Monday, Donnie told me that he was once again in the office, talking to the HR manager that the boy was back. He gave the time and location. This time he was in the lower level of the school running around. He lost him in the cafeteria, and he thought he ran into the gym and out the exit doors in the gym. This time, Donnie, the principal, and the HR manager reviewed the security tape. Once again, they saw the boy running away down the lower level hallway and towards the cafeteria, where he disappeared. Nothing else happened after that. But when that Friday came around, the principal and the HR manager and Donnie all personally checked all the doors, and they were all locked like they were supposed to. Satisfied that there was no way that the boy could come in, they went home for the weekend, while Donnie stayed behind. Everybody was wrong. Donnie was waiting for them on Monday again. He said that the boy came back over the weekend. All three of them looked at the video as the boy ran around the upper level and eventually took off towards the north door, which was the front door of the school. On camera, you could see that Donnie was behind them about 15 yards as he made a turn towards the front door and then just disappeared. The principal and the HR manager were all confused as they had all checked the doors before they left. Things got busy that week and everybody just put it to the side until Friday came along. When Donnie arrived, the principal and HR manager were still there. Basically, they told him that they need to find out who this kid is and that the HR manager was going to stay with him tonight and help Donnie out. My friend said this was perfect. 1, they could find out who this boy was. And 2, as my friend said, if it is a spirit, this would turn this non-believer into a believer. So the principal left, and only the HR manager and Donnie stayed behind. Once inside, the HR manager and Donnie went to the security office. They both got a two-way radio and settled in for the night. Donnie left on his first round of checks in the building, while the manager stayed at the cameras watching. As the night went on, every once in a while Donnie would make eye contact with the cameras as he made his way back to the office from the lower level classrooms to the upper level classrooms and the library. Everything was quiet until around 3 a.m. when Donnie went on his rounds. He started on the lower level and made his way to the upper. When he got to the end of the hallway, that's when he got on the two-way radio. He said that the manager told him that he could see the little boy down in the lower level. He said that he must have just passed him, or maybe he was hiding in the last classroom as he walked by. Donnie turned around and went back downstairs right away. He got to the bottom and called the manager back on the two-way. He asked where he went. The manager said over the radio that he saw the little boy sneaking towards the restrooms at the end of the hall by the cafeteria. Donnie just shined his flashlight down the hall, and that's when he caught a glimpse of the boy looking at him around the corner of the boys' bathroom. Donnie yelled at him, and that's when he took off running down towards the bathroom. But before he could get there, he said he saw a shadow come out and headed towards the cafeteria and the gym. He also could hear feet running down towards the gym as he came around the bathroom. That's when he heard the gym doors open and close. Donnie kept running, and as he came into the gym, he could see the shadow go out the other gym door and back into the cafeteria. He ran towards the same door, but at this point, any footsteps had stopped. That's when he called the manager over the radio, asking if he saw where the little boy went. The manager came back and said that the boy was running down the hallway. The manager came back and said that the little boy was actually running down the hallway he had just come from. Apparently he was making a big circle. Before Donnie could say anything, he saw the boy peek out at the end of the hallway, so he took off running. On the cameras, the manager could see the little boy running away from Donnie, down the hallway towards the cafeteria, through the gym doors, and then coming back out the other side. Donnie could also be seen running down the hallway again. The manager then caught the little boy as he started running down the upper level hallway into the library and the front office. The manager saw Donnie as he came out into the upper level hallway, so he stopped and called him on the radio, and that he could actually see him hiding at the end of the hallway. As he said that, Donnie saw the little boy peek around the corner at him. He yelled at him again and took off running as the boy took off towards the front door. As he came around the end of the hallway, he could see that no one was there as he looked towards the front door. So he stopped and called the manager over the radio, asking which way the boy ran. When he went out the door, the manager radioed back. He said the little boy was out front by the front door. Donnie looked towards the front door, but he didn't see anyone. So he called the manager again over the radio, asking him where's he at. The manager then said that he was right there at the front door, but he sounded scared over the radio. Are you sure? Donnie asked. The manager then said, he's right there. Don't you see him? He's looking back at you through the glass. Donnie then said, I don't see anybody. The manager then said, he's right there. He's looking right at you. There's no one here, dude. What are you talking about? Then, the radio went dead. Donnie shined his flashlight towards the front door, but there was nothing there. He tried calling the manager back, but there was no answer. So he shined his flashlight one last time, and so he made his way back into the security office. When he walked in, the manager was sitting there, staring at the monitor. He was pale white. Dude, are you good? Donnie asked. He shook his head yes, and pointed to the screen. Donnie was looking, but like when he was there was nothing on camera. It took a minute for the manager to compose himself, and after a few minutes of talking what the heck is going on, Donnie said that he wanted to see where the boy was right in front of him, that he apparently just missed. I'm not sure if you're familiar with those surveillance security programs, but they're really glitchy, and it takes a while to get to the time frame that you wanted to get to. Regardless, they started to play back, and there, Right in front of him, on video, was the little boy. He had his hands cupped to the glass of the front door. While he was looking at Donnie, he could see himself talking on the radio, looking towards the front door and then shining his flashlight towards it. The little boy kept his hands cupped alongside his face while he looked in. His flashlight made him lean back away from the window, but then he went back to looking back at him. As the video kept rolling, he could see himself walking away as the little boy came in and followed him down the hallway. Slowly, right behind them, they continued watching, silent, frozen, and then they switched to the camera inside the security office. The video showed the manager sitting exactly where he was now, with Donnie coming into the office, staring at the screens. But then, that's when they saw the boy walk in behind them. He stepped up beside them and just stared at them. And just as they were about to stop the video, something else moved on screen. A shape, a shadow, it appeared behind both of them. My friend Donnie didn't stay much longer after that night. He ended up quitting a few days later, and that's when he told me the story. But what about the HR manager? Well, he ended up transferring out not too long after, because no matter how new the school is, or how many times you paint the walls, some things never leave, not if they belong to the land. And the land itself, it never forgets. In all seriousness, my friend Donnie wouldn't make any of this up. Like I said, you used to hear stories about the school before it was remodeled. But recently, there's been stories starting to come back up again. I dare you to ask anybody who's a teacher at Pahinsenteo, Iowa, on the Pine Ridge REZ. Have you seen the shadow, the tall hat man on the REZ? I did once. A man with a black hat and a long coat, cowboy boots and no face, super tall at that, like 12 feet tall. You know what I'm talking about too. I have told several of my friends this story, and to my surprise it seems like everyone at some point in their life also had an encounter with this spirit, devil, or whatever it is. But for some reason it seems like nobody talks about it, because no one can remember it if it was a dream, or if it was real. But once I tell them my story, it's always the same reaction. They end up saying that they did see him, once, twice, and maybe even more. That I just reminded them of a memory of when they were younger. And what's crazy is that their encounters, including mine, happens at the most random times. Like for example, one friend told me that he saw the hat man, the tall man, in the backseat of his car as he was driving at night. He said he saw him through the mirror. He said he almost ended up crashing. Somebody else said that they just saw him randomly standing in the street light across the street from their house in Oklahoma. Other friends of mine who don't know each other actually said the same thing. At first they said no, but then they said they had sleep paralysis once, and they saw him while it happened, standing in the corner of the room. One of my friends said that she would wake up in the middle of the night, randomly, and that he was just standing outside her window, and that he kept appearing in her dreams, standing in the doorway for months. I myself actually saw him twice. Once when I was with my brother. We were going through the woods and we saw him, chased him, but we had no idea what we were chasing. Well, we didn't really chase him, because you don't chase the hat man. We wanted to see what he was up to. This person, we actually had no idea who it was, especially because nobody ever walked through there. So if anything, we were just being curious. He was a tall figure in dark clothes, walking through the trees. He didn't run. He didn't look back. He just kept moving. We were around 10 or 11 years old, young and dumb. We thought we were brave. We called this place the woods, even though it was just a patch of trees near the REZ housing. But when you're a kid, even a few dozen trees feel like a forest. We followed him until he reached the tree line, and then he went through it. and we did as well. And that's when we saw it. There was a small hill, a dip going down, if that makes sense. We then looked down, and I swear, he was floating. But not just floating, he was still moving, but his boots weren't touching the ground. It's like he was drifting, like he was just gliding. And that image, the long coat, the white hat, no face, just a very dark figure coasting through, the creepiest shit I ever seen. Well, that was until I saw him the second time. We ended up running back home, not even telling anyone about it. The next encounter actually happened not too long ago, maybe like 3 years ago, at my previous job. I was a teacher on the REZ and I was also the coach. By the time that the kids got on the bus and took off, it was always dark in the evenings during the winter. Honestly, I don't even like talking about this. It's dark right now, and I can't believe I'm writing this. And people say that talking about certain things brings them up, but fuck it. Anyways, I really needed to catch up on some grading and making new lessons for the students, so I thought I would stay late. After about 30 minutes, around 6:30, it was already dark, and I decided to run to the bathroom, as I hadn't gotten a chance to go since around lunchtime. For those who are teachers, y'all know that every minute counts, and lunchtime is not really a lunch. Anyways, as I'm passing the long corridor near my classroom, it goes off to an area that is like a pod, and it has all the computer labs off of it. I happened to look down that hallway, and I saw someone standing there near the doors. I kept walking, but then I was like, wait a minute. You know how sometimes you see something and then you look away, and then you look back again really quick? Mentally, that's what happened to me. I was like, nobody could be that tall, and I didn't think anyone else was in the building. So I stopped, took a few steps back, so I could look down again, and this person was now all the way to the back of the pod, standing near a classroom door. Memories came back of when I saw him when I was a kid in the woods, fucking floating away. But on top of that, it was really weird. Nobody could move that fast. So I was like, fuck this. I ran to the bathroom, used it. I started shaking so bad because I know I had to go back past that corridor. I started praying while in the bathroom, and I really didn't want to walk back, but I had to. So after I used it, I basically ran straight to my classroom trying to stay calm. Walked in, grabbed all my stuff and didn't turn anything off. I was so scared to walk out of my own classroom door, but I did after saying some prayers again. And this time, I didn't look nowhere. I just went out the door closest to me, got in my car, went home, and was scared the entire night, and I didn't sleep. He was very tall, slender, and he was definitely wearing a hat and a coat. I kept thinking that my brain was making something up, but it was too much like all these horror movies and things that kids talk about. Anyways, I have lots of stories about school. I did start talking to some of the players that I would coach, because they were all having similar incidents when we would come back late. They would run to the bathroom before their families came to pick them up, and they would talk about all sorts of weird things and noises, and even hearing people that were in school, but nobody else was there. We would all be hanging out talking about the game, and I would wait until everyone was picked up. But throughout this whole time, some of the players would go to a vending machine or to the bathroom, and they would come back and tell me like, who else is here? I heard noises from another classroom. So I started collecting all the stories, and I was interviewing other teachers as well, especially the ones that would stay late, and they all told me similar stories of hearing noises and seeing some sort of shadow, and never stayed late again, and even recommended students to be picked up as early as possible. So have you ever seen this Hat Man? Let me know if you have, whether it was in a dream, a shadow, or something, because apparently he's out there watching us, lingering around at the end of the hallway or the end of your bed. And let us pray that we don't see him, because he likes to show up at the most random places and times. I know you heard plenty of stories from the REZ, from your grandparents, passed down throughout the years. But this one's different. This one's not a third-hand account or something I heard from somebody else. No. This, as people like to say, comes straight from the horse's mouth. Something that I went through when I was a lot younger. I'm an old man now, and this happened around 40 years ago, back in the early 80s. Wow, time flies. I was living with my ex-wife, no longer with her, but for the sake of the story, I want you to be fully aware and experience what I did. Now that I think about it, fuck, it all makes sense now. I want to say something that popped in my head, but I'll tell you at the end. I just can't believe I hadn't connected the pieces. So we were living in a 3-bedroom trailer at that time. It was about 4 miles north of this community. The trailer was right off the highway. We had about 3 neighbors who lived about half a mile from us, so we were pretty isolated. Isolation isn't always good, at least not out here on the REZ. Especially in the area that we were in. We always got all kinds of people coming around at all hours of the day and night. People who break down on the road, hitchhikers, drunks, all kinds of people. So basically, we were way before you enter our community. So if you came walking or broke down the highway and came into town, our home would be the first thing you see. I remember it was Christmas Eve. My ex had relatives who had a church about 25 miles north of where we lived at. It was a dirt road all the way out there in the backcountry. Now, her relatives always had a Christmas get-together dinner and a gift exchange on Christmas Eve. Her family wasn't fully native, so they did things a bit different. By the way, we had 2 kids. They are fully grown now, obviously, but at that time she wanted to take the kids out there. I didn't really know her aunts and uncles, so I told her that she could go with the kids and I was just gonna stay at home. So I stayed home with our cat, and we also had 2 dogs. It was cold outside, and around 10 p.m., I was watching a concert on DirecTV laying down on the couch. All of a sudden, the cat started hissing and her fur and tail stood straight up. She was sitting in the kitchen window still looking outside towards the north. I figured she was acting this way because our 2 dogs were outside. I had to let them out to use the bathroom, but she kept on and on, like she was mad and hissing and growling very loud. But then, what really put me on edge was when our dogs Barkley and Betty, they also began barking. I then heard them start to fight with something outside. I looked out the living room window, and I saw them attacking a damn bear outside. I said a bear, not like a huge bear, but I swear it was a bear. Now, here's the crazy part. There's no bears out here, so I was in shock. I did own a rifle at that time, so I went to my room and got my gun and loaded it. I remember the moon was out, and I could see very well. I looked out the window again, and this time, Betty had jumped on the right rear leg of the bear, and she bit the bear's leg. What happened next is the craziest thing I ever heard, or witnessed. After she bit the bear's leg, the bear let out a scream, but not just a scream. It was a woman's scream. Keep in mind, all of this happened in split seconds. The bear then hit Betty, and Betty flew about 10 yards away. As soon as that happened, I ran outside with my rifle and started firing towards the bear, and it took off running towards the east. The strange thing about it was when it took off running, it sounded like a horse that was running. You could hear it hitting the ground as it ran into the darkness. I went to go check on Betty, and she was laying there, not moving. She had some kind of green slime oozing out of her mouth. I picked her up and took her inside. I put a blanket down on the floor near the wood stove, and then mixed up some medicine herbs and some water and put some in her mouth. When my wife and the kids got back well after midnight, I told her everything that happened. She was scared. I don't even think I should have told her, but she seemed to be in shock. I'm sure she was just tired from the long trip as well. She didn't ask anything. She nodded and told me to get some rest. We then went to bed. Around 2 a.m, somebody was knocking on the front door. Now, here's another negative thing about where we lived at. Remember how I said we would come across all sorts of people, especially at night? Well, I want to say that people were stranded on the highway and they walked towards town, and our home was the first thing they saw. Sometimes some of these people were persistent and they wouldn't stop knocking till somebody opened. Sometimes you could just ignore them, but oftentimes it's better just to let them know that you couldn't help them. It was just very annoying. That's when my dog started barking, so there was no way to ignore it. So I got up, put some shoes and a hoodie on, and I forced myself to go see who it was. I opened it, and there she was. A woman, standing, leaning against an old red truck. She looked at me with a smile. I remember what she said too. "Good evening. I'm having some trouble with my truck. Could you help me?" Something about her made my skin crawl. I'm not sure if I was still half asleep or something, but something was off. About her, at least. Her smile never changed. She was literally just smiling the whole time. Now, like I said, we got plenty of weird, crazy, good, normal, all-around types of folks in the middle of the night, so nothing could really surprise me at this point. I looked around just to make sure I wasn't getting set up or anything, or for anything that looked off. As I started walking towards her, that's when she walked in front of the truck to open the hood. When the headlights of the truck lit up, that's when I saw it. I noticed that one of her legs was wrapped up in some sort of white rag, soaking through with what looked to be blood. It was fresh. I felt my stomach drop. It had to be her. She was the one that the dogs had fought with. I stared at her for a moment, and something clicked. Her appearance, the blood, that creepy smile, it all made sense now. Before I could say anything, she seemed to notice the shift in me. She said, "I don't need your help anymore." That's when I ran. I ran back inside and I slammed the door shut. I ran to find my wife, my heart racing. By the time that I got my rifle and went back outside, she was already driving off. Her truck's tires kicked up the gravel, and she left. I stood there for a moment, rifle in hand. Those damn witches. Betty, our dog, lay down for about 4 days. We kept giving her medicine, and after the last day, she got up like nothing ever happened. After this whole thing, we moved away from that spot. There was too many weird things that happened there. I never did see the old woman again. I don't think she was hit by any of the bullets from that night. However, she was bleeding from the dog bites. Now, remember I told you earlier that something clicked, or something that I remember? What if other things were at play? Why do I say this? Well, everything went downhill after this incident. My wife left me. I ended up moving. She ended up taking the kids. What if my ex-wife was part of this whole situation that happened? What a coincidence that this happened while they were gone. What if she was trying to get rid of me somehow? Why didn't this witch do anything physically? I didn't grow up traditional, you can say. What was she doing out there at night on our land? What if her family isn't really a normal family? I never did meet them, and I never went to these so-called Christmas Eve parties that they would have. I don't know what to think now. Out here on the REZ, spirits are to be respected. Put an offering out. Don't show fear. And this comes from a personal experience that I want to share with you all. I know it's hard not to show fear sometimes, but if you think back, our parents, our grandparents, they never told us these stories to scare us. They didn't want us to be afraid. They actually wanted us to listen, to learn, to respect the land, and to respect the spirits. They didn't gather us around late at night just for shits and giggles. It was always for something practical, a lesson, and a reminder. These stories weren't for entertainment. They're actually warnings, teachings. It was always like, don't whistle at night because this will happen. Don't wash your clothes at night because of this. Don't say their name, so and so. I was talking with a friend the other day, and we noticed how always The people who always go out looking for bad things to happen. And I mean this in the most respectful way. But those people are usually white. It's like they have no knowledge or respecting the unknown. Then when they attack, they freak out. And I think this is why some people don't show respect. They are not familiar with traditional or quote-unquote old teachings. I do believe as natives we are more respectful to the unknown. So in 2009, my cousin Mikey came to live with me and my husband and 16-year-old son. Mike had a very serious liver problem. He actually got sick, and he even got hepatitis C from using drugs when he would get drunk for months. He came to live with us because, those who go down that path and go beyond addictions need help. We had a decent-sized house with 2 floors. When you walked into our home, you walked into the main floor, which was the second floor, where the master bedroom, the kitchen, the dining room, and the washroom. Downstairs was the basement. Well, not really a basement, because if you came out you would get to the backyard. It had a big bedroom, laundry room, and also a huge room. I know, the custom home was set up different. While Mike was living with us, he slowly started changing his ways, and man, you could see it in his face. He even got a great job at some office as a financial advisor. However, as time went on, he slowly started drinking bit by bit again. I'm not sure if you have ever tried helping someone who struggles with addictions, but stuff ends up missing in your home. These are actually the first signs, because people are needing to find money, so they sell stuff around your home. If you didn't know, when the liver is so messed up, the mind gets messed up as well. The person doesn't remember days after drinking. Now why is that? Well, I learned a lot about this when I was helping Mike. The liver filters your body, your blood. However, when your liver isn't working no more, simply because of drinking or using too much drugs, the toxins build up in the brain because the liver can't filter them out anymore. So the pattern just continued. I would watch him come through the stairs sometimes, and he wouldn't say anything, and then he would go back down to the bedroom. I always knew when he was going to come up the stairs by the sound that the bedroom door made. It would stick and you had to pull it. I almost forgot my son got pretty close to Mike and even gave him his own room. Months went by and so did the drinking pattern. Eventually my husband and me had a talk with him because there is only so much you can do. We would lend him money. We would take off work to help him find a different job. Again, if you have ever lived with an addict, you know how the cycle goes. There would be seasons and weeks when he would sober up and promise to do better. And that's how the cycle was. Mike finally saved up with our help and got a place of his own. He soon lost his job and he continued to drink. I have to tell you that Mike is an amazing man, very intelligent and such a beautiful heart. I never once heard him raise his voice at anyone. He did have some pretty bad skeletons in his closet, and he didn't know how to deal with them, other than drinking. Just like we all have some stuff that we're dealing with. Some people just deal with it differently. So Mike started getting sicker, and he soon ended up in the hospital just before Christmas of 2009. Then, he passed away on January 8, 2010. So this happened back then when I used to work crazy hours at the women's shelter, and I would get home around midnight, and it would take me a couple of hours or more to wind down. By this time my son moved back into his room. I would sit in the living room, drink tea, watch a bit of TV, and then I started hearing my son's bedroom door open. At first it didn't faze me, because there was a freezer down there that my son would keep ice cream and other frozen treats too. And he always stayed up late playing some sort of video game. This went on for about a week. I got home late one night, this time knowing it was just my husband at home, and he was sleeping. My son wasn't at home because he called me to see if he could camp over at a friend's house. So that night I was sitting drinking tea, getting ready to call it a night, way past midnight, listening to some true crime as we all do. That's when I suddenly hear my son's bedroom door open. This time I was like, what the fuck? The hair on my arm stood up as I looked at the stairs, feeling really off, and more than a little freaked out. I felt like someone was there, and all of a sudden, it was gone. Knowing that I heard his door open, I had to go check, in case someone had broken in. Looking back, I should have woken up my husband, but hey, we all respond differently in those situations. My heart was racing and my hands were shaking. His door was closed. What the heck? I just stood there for a second, not sure what to think. Then I went back upstairs and headed to bed, feeling safer beside my husband. I did keep this to myself. A few days later, I get home from work late at night again, and my son is up. He's waiting for me. He tells me he was sleeping, to the point where he was dreaming too, when suddenly he woke up to a noise. He saw that his TV was on, and his door was open. No one was there, but he swears that he saw a face by the door. He said it was just the silhouette of somebody, but that it most definitely felt evil. He also had school the next morning, so I told him that he could sleep in our room for the night. The next morning, his eyes were puffy and tired. He said he didn't sleep at all, and he could hear us snoring, but that he also heard the door open again and again. So he was simply too afraid to go back to sleep, especially because of the bad dream. I told him to stay home from school that day. I had no idea what to do. So I called a friend and told her everything. She gave me a name of an elder, someone that was known for cleansing homes of spirits, and that part stuck with me. I called him, and he told me not to explain anything. He just told me to come over and that he'll see what he can do. So we ended up going, me and my son. I brought a pouch of tobacco to his home, and we sat while he held my hands with his eyes closed. He didn't speak for a minute. He was just listening. He then opened his eyes, looked at me and said, "You have someone in your home." I simply nodded. I was thinking he was talking about my husband, but he grabbed his coat and a small wooden box. "Let's go," he said. We got back home. He was asking to go downstairs. He said that the spirit was waiting. He told both of us to come with him. We followed him downstairs, nervous, shaking. The elder opened the wooden box. Inside were bundles of herbs, sage, sweetgrass, cedarwood, and a few others that I didn't recognize. He lit a bundle with matches, and the smell filled the room. He started going around, and he started asking questions. "Why are you here? What do you need?" Then he would stop like he was listening, and he would respond with, "Okay, I see. I'll tell them." He then turned to my son and said, "Your uncle says thank you for everything that you did for him, for respecting him. He says to never give up, and he's not saying goodbye because he'll always watch over you." At that point, my son broke down in tears. I felt something shift in the room. It felt warm, but heavy. Then the elder turned to me, and I'll never forget the look in his eyes. He said, "He has something to say to you as well. He says thank you for taking him in when no one else would, for loving him when he didn't love himself." I started crying at this point. However, the elder said there's one more thing that we need to know. Before he came to live with you, he got involved with people he shouldn't have, people who practiced bad medicine. He was in a dark path, and someone, maybe a stranger, maybe even someone who claimed to help him, but it wasn't good help. It was a skinwalker. They don't always show up the way you think, and this thing has been tied with him ever since. The elder said that when Mike came to live with us, Mike carried it with him. He didn't know, but it clung to him through his suffering, his addiction, and whenever Mike moved out, that theme, it stayed behind. That's what opened the door. That's what your son saw. It wasn't Mike. I started to remember the chills that I had that night, the cold air, the creepy feeling, everything. I know it wasn't just my imagination. The elder then requested to open the window and remove the screen, and we did. We said a prayer, and the elder did too. He let the sage bundle burn down. Then he told us to leave the room for a few minutes. We went upstairs, sat there quiet. Then we heard it, the bedroom door. But this time, the energy felt different. It felt peaceful, I do want to end this by saying something. I know Mike didn't win every battle. He struggled, he fell, he lost things, jobs, relationships, and even pieces of himself. But I know he never stopped fighting. He battled addiction, illness, and in the end, he started battling something darker that was trying to claim him. Bad medicine may have followed him, and maybe it was the cause of his addiction. I know we gotta play our part too. I know Mike had a good heart, and I know this wasn't the end for him. This was just the beginning of his real journey. And if he's out there now, watching over us, I hope he knows that we still love him, and that we always will. I would tell you to stop playing hide and seek at night, but honestly, just don't play any games at night on the REZ. I'll tell you why. It's something that my grandpa told me one time when we were playing hide and seek at night. More like in the evening, just us cousins, running around grandpa's yard like we always did whenever we would go over. I remember it was getting late. The sun had started to set, and it was going to be getting dark in just about an hour or so. I was crouched behind the shed peeking, trying my best not to laugh, when I heard the back door creak open. Grandpa stepped outside. The shed was right across from the backyard door, so of course he saw me peeking my head from the distance when he came out. He stood there for a moment, watching us. Then, in a serious tone, he asked what we were doing. My cousin, who was counting facing the outside wall of the house right by the front door, said, "We're playing hide and seek," and he even asked if he wanted to play with us. Well, as I kept looking, I saw that my grandpa didn't say anything at first. He just looked towards the yard, including me. He then said out loud for all of us to stop what we were doing and come to the fire in the yard. My grandpa always had this ritual to get all his grandkids together by the fire and talk to us the day before we left back home. A tradition that I miss now that I'm grown. But nobody argued. We respected our grandpa, so we all came out of our hiding spots. I came out behind the shed, one of my cousins from inside the shed, another from inside the house. Cheater, I know. And another one from a tree. Pretty good hiding spots if you ask me. So we gathered around the fire pit while he threw a few more logs down, and he told all of us to sit. He let out a sigh, first saying how it's so good to see all of us, and that he's actually glad that we all came, and that one day if Creator grants us the time, we will be in his shoes as well, understanding and passing everything to our children as well. Then he got quiet, and he stared into the fire for a long time before speaking. I remember one of my cousins. You know how obnoxious young boys are. Well, he was like, "So what's up? What you gonna tell us today?" I remember he said that we have so much to learn, and that he wants us to learn something tonight, before we end up leaving tomorrow. He started off by saying that he was gonna tell us a story, but it wasn't gonna be a story like any other he's told us before. He said that the story was about our great-great-grandpa. It's been passed down through each generation, but he was waiting for the right time. He said our great-great-grandpa Gary. By the way, he said that wasn't his name. However, at the time that Gary was here, because of colonization and assimilation, is that many of them no longer had native names anymore. The government only documented quote-unquote American names. Many natives who got the privilege to being raised around their own culture still ended up getting their indigenous names during a ceremony. So he said that when Gary was around the same age as us, he was taken to one of those boarding schools, the ones that would take your hair, your culture, your language, everything. That's what Gary had said. Keep in mind again, this is my great-great-grandpa. So this was mostly around the early 1900s, at the peak of boarding schools, when the motto was literally, kill the Indian and save the man. The places were at some church schools, nuns, the priests, the teachers abused the young boys and girls, to the point where some girls would get pregnant, and they would have to leave the boarding school. But I won't touch on that today. Gary described the boarding school as old. They made the boys cut their hair. They beat them if they spoke anything other than the English language. They were forced to sing Christian hymns in English. They would have to march to school, military style. Gary said despite everything going on, they still found good morale in the mixture of their own people. Of course, they would still speak their own language. Sometimes they would get caught, but that didn't prevent them from talking in secret. So Gary said that there was a basement under that school, off limits, and the kids were not allowed to go down there. Not just because the teacher said so, or as Gary called it, the military staff, but because other kids spread rumors, saying the bodies of kids were kept down there of those who were punished. He said one night, a few boys decided to play hide and seek around 10 p.m. when they assumed everyone was asleep. They said it was just for fun, said something about not being afraid. I guess they had to find something fun to do. They would always play this game once a week, always having the same places to hide at. And I guess the exciting part was not only hiding from the person looking for them, the seeker, but from the actual military staff as well. Of course, one of the boys had the bright idea of hiding in the basement. Why? It was always the same spots where people would be found. In the bathroom, under a bunker bed, under the covers, or just trying to avoid the seeker by moving around. Gary said most of the kids didn't want to go down to the basement, but one of the older boys convinced them, so they all went through a small closet where the basement door was at, and they crept down the steps, keeping the basement door open to let some light shine in, and so it wouldn't close by accident. He said the school was a mixture of early light bulbs, and even some oil lamps. Even though the boarding school was hell on earth, this one was government funded, so they had some access to light bulbs. Gary said it was dark down there, but after a few minutes, his eyes were adjusted. The older kid who dared them to go down there also went down there with them. Gary said it was about 7 or 8 of them. At first they were creeped out, but then it was just a normal basement. The moonlight actually helped a bit. There was one of those basement windows in the corner of the room. Gary said everything was dusty, full of boxes and crates. They were all giggling, smirking, and having a good time, laughing how the seeker was not going to be able to find anybody, and he was going to get so mad. Everyone was looking for a spot to hide in the basement, simply because they knew that maybe one of the military staff might see them and come inspect, but also in case the seeker came looking for them by any chance. Gary said that he was starting to look in different places to hide, but someone was already there. After a few minutes passed, they started hearing footsteps above in the halls, so he said this was his sign to just hide anywhere. So he ended up picking a spot behind some crates. Again, one of the boys was there giggling, and so Gary apologized, and he said that he couldn't find any other spot. Gary then asked the boy if he thought the seeker will actually come down the basement himself and look for us. The boy was still trying to hold in his laugh, and then he told Gary that this was his favorite game. Gary told him that it wasn't his favorite, but what else could they play and have some fun if they were not allowed to play the games that their parents showed them? That's when the boy asked Gary, "Who are we hiding from?" One of the other boys that was also hiding whispered back, "If y'all don't shut up, he's gonna find us." The boy then whispered back, "Why? Shouldn't we be hiding from the other one? The one who is living down here?" Gary then said that he got confused, and he looked at the boy, and that's when he noticed that he wasn't wearing one of the army uniforms assigned like the rest of them. His smile was still frozen on his face, giggling again. I'll tell the next part of the story tomorrow. It's getting kinda late, and it's getting dark, but if you didn't guess by now, the story has to do with playing hide and seek. Shit, don't even play any games at night. As a matter of fact, just go to sleep instead. So you shouldn't play some games at night on the REZ, especially at night. But why in the REZ? Can these things happen if I'm no longer on the REZ? They can. They're actually already happening, but people don't notice because they have become numb to these things. There's always something going on the spiritual side of things that people will not notice. I'm not saying that this always comes with playing games at night, but these actions do open doors and lets other things in. So anyways, my grandpa was telling me the story about his grandpa Gary, how they were down there hiding. The boy whispered back to them saying, "Shouldn't we be hiding from the other one?" As Gary looked at him, he noticed that he wasn't wearing the same uniform as them. He then saw him smile, and that's when the door at the top of the basement stairs slammed shut. When it did, all the kids scrambled, shouting, calling out to the others. It was dark, and everybody gathered by the window where the moonlight was coming through. As they all got together trying to figure out what was going on, they all heard somebody speak. "This is my favorite game." Gary said that after the boy said this, he began to count down. At least that's what he assumed, because it wasn't in some language that he knew of, not even in the English one that they were being taught. That's when they all decided to run towards what they assumed the basement door. Throughout this whole time, the other boy was counting. They went up the small steps, but they couldn't open it. They started screaming and banging on the door to help them, and that's when they heard the voice of the boy behind them. "I found you." Gary then said that they were all banging on the basement door, yelling at this point, but they couldn't hear anything. No footsteps, no voices above. Gary said that's when the room began to change. The small window with the moonlight, it started dimming, even though the moon hadn't moved, and now it was becoming pitch black inside. And the worst part, Gary said they saw the stairs they came down fading away to where it was just a wall now, or something that looked like one. One of the boys screamed that he saw a door on the other side of the room, and so they ran towards it, and when they did, it wasn't even there anymore. Gary then said even the floor felt different at this point. He wasn't sure if it was real, or if the fear was making him imagine it, but the air started feeling thicker as well, like the walls were closing in slowly. The voice echoed, "Let's finish the game." My grandpa said that Gary didn't know the word for it back then, but later, when he told him the story, he said it was some sort of portal, a place between here and the other side. That's when Gary panicked. He closed his eyes and tried to remember a prayer, not the ones they were forced to learn. Yes, at these schools they were taught Christian hymns and songs as well, but he started saying the prayers that he was raised with. He began to speak them out loud, and he told all the other boys to follow his lead. They all closed their eyes, held hands, and started praying. And then, silence. The basement door creaked open. It was one of the military staff leaders. There was so much light coming in. The boys didn't even waste a second. They ran, falling up the stairs, crying, screaming, pushing past each other to get out. And standing at the top of the stairs was the seeker, the one that they left behind. The military leader who opened the door stood beside him, arms crossed, with her face pale. And Gary said that's when things got weird. The teacher was demanding to know where the hell they'd been at, why they went into the basement, and why they were not asleep. The boys tried to explain. They tried to say it was just a game, but that didn't work. And their friend who was the seeker, he said that he didn't know what to do after 2 hours had passed and nobody was saying anything. He had already given up and even went back to bed. He said after a few more hours he assumed maybe something happened since nobody had showed back up. Well, to their beds, right? And so he decided to go tell one of the military staff. Gary swore it was only a few minutes, 10, maybe 20, but the clock wasn't lying. When they saw it in the office, it was around 4 in the morning, and like always, there was no sympathy, no explanation. They all got punished, of course. They got beat with the belts that the staff always had. No food, no water. They weren't allowed to speak to each other for the next 2 days. They had to clean every hallway of the school, while everyone else got to rest. That was the way it was. But Gary said that none of this was bothering him, except for what came after did scare him. It was one of the boys who had been with them in the basement. He came back, and after their punishment was over, he would sit on his bed. He didn't cry, didn't talk much, but at first nobody really noticed. They just figured he was quiet from the punishment. But then he started acting weird, different. His whole demeanor had changed. Everything. And sometimes late at night, Gary said that he would see him standing up, sitting up in the bed, cross-legged, facing the wall. Anyways, it's getting kinda late again, and I'll finish telling you what my grandpa said, and the reason he's telling us this scary story. Not to scare us, but to try to teach us instead. To this day I have never whistled at night. I haven't said the word that will come for you. I haven't even said that word, the one that everybody knows not to say. But something that I have experienced that scared the fuck out of me is one night when me and my buddies were playing cards. Despite my grandpa warning us not to do these things, I didn't listen to everything. I'll tell you how I learned the hard way after I tell you what happened with Gary at the boarding school. Remember, this did happen on the REZ. So one of their buddies that went down there to the basement with them, he started acting different. And Gary said that one of his bunk buddies was asking what was wrong with him, and he would just smile. That was it. He didn't talk much after that. He wouldn't answer. He would just sit there with that same grin. He would actually be humming some sort of song. And then, one morning, he was just gone. His bed was still made, his shoes were still there, but the boy was actually gone. The rumor started spreading, and one of the military staff members said that he most likely just ran away, that it happens all the time. That was it. No search, no letters, no announcements. It is true, it was very common. Kids would go missing, and they were simply marked as runaways. There were no reports filed, no prayers, no goodbyes. Gary said deep down they all knew he didn't run away. It was like whatever they had found down there in the basement, or whatever had found them, had something to do with it. But Grandpa did tell me as we gathered around the fire. That's why I don't ever want you to play hide and seek at night. Some games were never meant to play in places where stuff happened. That basement, it wasn't just a room. It was an entryway. He said all the things that happened in that school, the cutting of hair, the taking of names, the beatings, the silence, and the abuse. All of it left a mark. And in some places, where everything piles up, it doesn't just disappear. That's why when someone dies, we don't just clean it up and act like it didn't happen. My grandpa looked at the fire. All the bad energy, it stays behind. The fear, the sickness, it stays. It clings to the walls, to the air, even to the dirt. That's why our people don't mess around with houses where someone passed. We burn cedar, we bless the ground, or we simply don't go near it. He then pointed at the dirt by the fire and said, "Now imagine this, a lot of children who died scared, angry, alone, without their names, without ceremony, without any way back home. Some of them died afraid, alone. Some died with anger in their hearts, grief, shame, everything torn from them. That basement, it wasn't just haunted as some of you will think. It was full of bad energy." And that was the story that my grandpa told us. Now, as promised, here is my story that made me remember everything that Grandpa told me. I was in my 20s. Maria and her boyfriend Patrick had come over to visit Carolina and John, and I was there with my girlfriend Steph. I guess what do you call it? A triple date. We were all close back then. Maria had picked up some beer and a bottle of vodka on the way. We spent a few hours catching up, laughing, eating, just hanging around the kitchen like we always did. Eventually, we sat down at the kitchen table to play some cards and crack open a few beers. Nothing fell off at first, not until Maria pulled out the vodka. That's when you could see Carolina just tense up a bit. She didn't say anything right away, but I saw the look in her eyes. She later told us that John didn't do well with hard liquor. She said that he would act different, mean. I didn't really believe it then. I should have. And now it makes sense why that was her reaction when Maria pulled out the bottle. We played cards for a while, and then things started to feel a little bit strange. Carolina even mentioned that it just felt cold all of a sudden. I noticed it too. I think everyone was sort of tipsy at this point. At least I thought. Apparently John was full-blown drunk, but he still seemed like he was good at playing it off. But then it happened. I kid you not. John fell back on his chair. We all laughed and jumped up when he did. And Carolina and Maria both said if he was okay. And he just started mumbling. Yeah, I think that's enough for him, as he was struggling to get up. But then suddenly, John got dragged. I swear, he moved a few feet. Everybody saw it because the women screamed, including my girlfriend. He then got up. Well, not really. He simply turned over. He got up on all fours and looked around like an animal. Then he started growling. We panicked. My girlfriend grabbed my arm. Patrick was already moving. We all ran upstairs and slammed the bedroom door shut, shoving the dresser in front of it. All of us were trembling. From behind the door, we could hear John downstairs. And then, something else. Something even worse. There were other sounds. Whispering, laughing. It sounded like he was having a conversation with himself. 5 minutes passed, then 10, and finally some silence. But just as we thought it was over, John started slamming against the door. He was only about 5.5 feet tall, and he weighed maybe around 140. But he nearly pushed that heavy dresser back with all 5 of us bracing against it. He didn't say anything. He then stopped, and we heard him stomp back downstairs. We sat there, trying to figure out what was going on. Then, out of nowhere, his voice came again, right outside the bedroom door. He was asking why we were hiding, why we wouldn't come downstairs. He said he and his buddy were waiting to drink with us. Then, he called out to me. My nickname is Rue, by the way. He said something that scared me to this day, and even now I still hear it in my dreams. He said, Rue, come play with us. Me and Gary are waiting for you. We didn't respond. We just stared at each other. That's when Patrick said not to say anything or even pay attention to it. After about 2 hours, the house went quiet again. Not hearing anything, we finally opened the door, creeping downstairs. John was sitting at the kitchen table, but he wasn't laughing anymore. He was just staring. His eyes were locked on one spot on the wall, silent. We didn't say anything. We just backed away and left. We walked down the road to the neighbor's place and didn't look back. Carolina left them within a month, and to be honest, none of us blamed her. But the weirdest thing, John's behavior didn't stop. Nobody ever got in contact with him again. My grandpa told us so many more things, but I myself am getting old as well, and I simply would like to pass the following to you. Why do people tell you not to whistle at night, not to play games like hide and seek when the sun goes down? You're not just playing a game. Let this be a warning, not just from me, but from the ones who came before me. Don't mess with things that you don't understand. Have you heard about stick Indians? We were told about them as young kids to kind of keep us in line. The memory is kind of foggy. Some people say that they are spirits of the woods. Some of them say that Bigfoot could be considered a stick Indian. People don't really talk about them because it can attract them. They are extremely feared, even among elders. Well, not really feared, more like feared in a respectful way, if that even makes sense. Not all tribes have them, but the local tribes here in the Seattle area believe in them, similar to how the Skinwalker evil witches are from the Navajo REZ. I had 2 encounters with them, not really personal encounters, but I've been in the area. One of them was when I was younger, and the most recent one happened a few months ago. The first one I'm going to tell you about was when I was a teenager, but the main thing is to always pay attention where you're going and not walk alone in the forest or in the woods. They will try to get you lost so they can take you and you won't be seen again. They even copy voices so they can get you to follow them if you're not paying attention. The first time I was about 15, we were up near an old trail that led to a spot used for sweat lodge ceremonies. It was me, a few cousins, and some other girls and boys from the REZ. We were all just messing around, not really taking anything serious. We were just excited to get away from home for the weekend. We were walking tall pines and thick underbrush, and even though it wasn't nighttime, the forest made it seem like it was already dark. Two of the girls started lagging behind. They were sort of goofing off, tossing pine cones and laughing. The rest of us kept walking towards the lodge, but after a while, someone said, "Hey, where are they?" It turns out that they had gone off the trail, following what they thought were our own voices. They swore they heard us calling them, telling them to hurry up, and they kept following, but they ended up quite a distance from the path. Some of the older guys were the ones who found them. They were just wandering along the tree line. One of them said it looked like they were about to step into a small pond nearby. They called out to them, but the girls didn't respond at first. It took a few tries before they snapped out of it, almost like if something had them in a trance. One of them kept saying, "We were following y'all. Y'all were calling out to us." But no one had been behind them, and no one had called out. Well, at least not in this area. The elder who was with us, a sun dancer, he pulled them aside and smudged them right there on the spot. He told them to sit down and not speak until after the ceremony. One of the older men that was with us said it was the Stick Indians. He told us not to talk about them, especially not by name, and definitely not to follow voices, no matter how familiar they sound. So I guess it wasn't a direct experience, but it still happened around me. Now, I eventually moved out of state, but sometimes I would go to Washington to visit my mom. A few days after I got there, my daughter, who was around 7, was asleep on the couch, and she said around 3 o'clock in the morning, she heard the bathroom door open, and she heard something run by her. When she looked around, she saw a very small black shadow peeking at her by the staircase. She was so scared that she turned her phone on to the music, and she got underneath her blanket. Suddenly, her music stopped, and she heard the phone being thrown off the nightstand. The other thing she said is that she felt paralyzed. When she told me all this the next morning, I knew what it sounded like, and I started remembering and getting that same feeling that I got in the woods. So naturally I told my mom it was a bad idea. She reached over and popped me on the side of the head. "You must have been talking about them," she said, "or you were thinking about them too much. That's why they came." I did try explaining that I wasn't even thinking about them, but she did cut me off real quick. She started yelling at me right there in the kitchen. She said that's what happens when you open the door with your mouth, talking about things that are better left alone, especially around little ones. Then she got quiet, went to her bedroom, came back with her smudge bowl. She burned cedar. She started praying over the doorways, and she told me to keep my mouth shut for a few days, not just about them, but about anything strange. By the way, she was being serious. She said words are power. And so that night, around 3 o'clock again, I swear, I heard footsteps in the hallway, like a kid that was walking, only my daughter was asleep beside me this time. And something else that my grandma also mentioned when I was a kid. She said don't make eye contact. They can bring you sickness. If you don't believe me, go down to the river, down to a stream, and talk about them. They will come up and see you at night. Thanks for listening. There's places you should avoid at night, especially on the REZ. If you grew up like I did around very traditional parents, I know they told you, especially when Grandma came around, to never be out at night. But the other thing, and I don't know how true this is, maybe you heard it before, is something that my own mom told me. She said to avoid any areas of water at night. She said that the spirits roam around rivers, creek beds, lakes, basically among those places of water. And so that's the worst thing you can do around here at night. She told me these things because of something that happened to her. She said she was a big party person before I was born. This story takes place around western South Dakota. She told me that her and her friends were coming back from Hot Springs. This was back in 1978. They were driving back to Oglala down Highway 18, just a little east of where the Prairie Wind Casino now sits. If I can remember, it was late August, early September. They just crossed the bridge over the dry riverbed there. Someone had the call of nature summon them, so they all stopped and got out to do their business. When they pulled over, just passing the bridge, my mom said it was very quiet. No wind, nothing, just the sound of a nearby river stream. While waiting for the person to finish, they started hearing something running down the road towards them. My mom said it sounded like a dog that was running on all fours, but then it switched to running on two legs. It was definitely some kind of dog, and it was getting closer. She said her friend finished and they started rushing to get back into the car. That's when somebody started screaming about red eyes running down the road, and they started hearing some wet breathing. They all get in as something slams into the rear of the car. They speed off, with whatever is chasing them running alongside the car. One of them said it was Bigfoot, but with an elk head and curly horns, glowing red eyes, and long finger hands with claws. At this point they're all scared, but when they get to that Slim Buttes Road turnoff, whatever was behind them, it stopped, and they started running down the opposite road. The next morning after they sobered up, they tried to put together everything that they saw, but some of them were even scared to describe it. And so with that, they refused to go back to Hot Springs for a bit. The story scared me as a kid. I was about 5 or 6 when she first told me. The last time she told me about it was a few months ago, before she passed on. She reminded me of a bunch of things. She said not to go around any areas that have water at night. Apparently the spirits like being around there. Everything is so new, so I think helping me tell her stories actually helps me feel better. So hopefully the lesson is learned for everybody, to not go around any lakes or rivers on the REZ. I heard a story from a Navajo couple that I got to know. The husband told me that they were driving at night one day, and they passed by a woman hitchhiker at night. They slowed down to pick her up, but he said that they got a good look at her, and they said that she looked strange and scary looking, so they didn't pick her up and kept driving instead. It does sound fucked up. Like, imagine you hitchhiking and a car stops by to pick you up, but then they see you, they give you a face, and they drive off instead. A lot of people are lucky they didn't have phones or social media back then, but I get it, because I would have done the same thing too. So as they drove off, the woman looked in her side mirror, and she said that she saw the lady running behind her car. She then freaks out and the man sees her too, and he also freaks out. That's what happens, I guess. Karma, maybe. I doubt it though. So they sped up faster and were able to get away from this lady, but they were both shocked at how fast she was running. A few minutes the couple lost her, and they were finally able to get home. That night, when they were about to go to sleep, he said they heard banging on the door, and when they turned on their outside light, they saw that same lady they passed on the highway. They began cussing at her, and they even called the tribal police, who came hours later. Not surprising. They said the woman just stood outside for almost an hour there, before walking off into the field. When the police came to investigate, and they went to go look where the woman walked off to, all they could find was big dog tracks leading away, which was strange because the couple didn't own any dogs. They said they aren't sure if it was a Skinwalker, But how was the woman able to find them all the way over here where they lived at? We are Wenatchee Yakima. My grandfather moved to Portland, but he still stayed pretty traditional. He always said that there were spirits everywhere and everything, and not to mention his house was full of rocks and shells and a bunch of other natural things. It reminds me a lot of that one movie, but he didn't keep antiques and stuff like that. It was just natural things. And just like those two people, he had a room that was full of this stuff. The door to that room was painted black. The story is that the room was shared by two, or maybe it was three of my aunties when they were in high school, and one of them came home from school with a can of black paint, and she painted the whole room black. My grandparents quickly ended up painting it with some brown trim and tan paint. They left the door all black. I forgot to mention, I was raised by them. I never did end up meeting my mom or dad. Maybe one day I will. Anyways, my cousins and me would play a game. We would dare each other to stay alone in the room with the black door, just because we knew our grandpa didn't really like people going in there. But you know how young teenagers can be. Now, like I said, the room was used for storage and was full of all kinds of interesting. We loved looking at all the things that he collected. We were always in there together. I never liked going in there alone. If you were alone in the room, you got very uncomfortable. Quickly, there would be some sort of ringing, buzzing in your head. I would start shaking, sweating, and get scared. The kind that you feel that something terrible was in that room. So this game we used to play, we would try to see who could spend the most time inside of that room by themselves. To add to it, we would say that the person had to stand by the window, facing away from the room. And we all felt strange going into that room, but that was the whole point of the game. Finally, when you couldn't stand it anymore, we came up with a safe word, which was to shout out to the rest of us who were waiting outside the door. But not just shout, it had to be something different. Like, has grandma had lunch yet? Not the screaming that goes, get me out, or stop it. So after they would say the safe word, we would swing the door open. The whole point of this is to not have our grandparents suspect anything of what we were doing. There was always this creepy feeling that the fear came from one of the things inside. There was something in the corner of the room. It was different from everything else. Something none of us ever messed with. It was a taxidermy animal, with the eyes missing. It looked like some sort of bird, like an owl. Creepy as fuck if you ask me. Not to mention, it looked pretty fucked up as well. It didn't look right. But like I said, my grandfather had rocks and sticks and some bird nests and other natural things all over the rest of the house. But this thing, it was sitting on a table, leaning in the corner that was across from the window, on the same wall as the door, but in the far corner of it. Even though we liked sorting through all of this old stuff in the trunks and boxes in the rest of the room, we never got close to it. I think we all knew something was up with that. I did ask my grandpa about it one time. Now, my grandpa was a very nice guy. He was always happy, laid back. But when I asked him about it, he snapped at me and said to never touch that. I asked why, and he wouldn't answer. But I do remember him getting very upset. So one day when my cousins came over for summer, they would get dropped off at our house. Looking back, my aunts and uncles most likely felt bad for me, and they wanted me to have good company. So when they got here, we would always dare each other to play, except this time it was on me, as I had lost and took the challenge. I went in there, I think I was around 16 or 15. For some reason, I'm not sure if it was my testosterone levels kicking in, or trying to act all tough, but I told myself I wasn't going to turn towards the window as always. Instead, I was going to stand by the window, facing the room. Sure enough, the classic feeling came along. The same feeling, fear, and that noise as well. I started sweating right away. I felt like the air in the room was getting thick and was crushing me. When I thought I wasn't going to be able to breathe, I saw this dark, tall shadow standing over the animal. Just a big black shadow. As soon as that happened, fuck that, I started screaming, but nobody would come in. I was frozen in my spot, and I couldn't move. It's kinda blurry after that. I remember my cousins coming in, and sort of surrounding me and pushing me out. I remember sitting with them at the bottom of the stairs, sobbing, but I didn't know how I got there. I remember feeling the need to just leave, and I did. Well, not like run away or anything, but more like I just needed to step out of the house for a moment. So my cousins and I all went to the backyard, and for the rest of the day, I refused to go back inside the house. And for many years after, I didn't go back in there again till I was 18, and my grandmother decided to sell the house and move to a smaller one. The whole family came to help her pack and move. She asked me and my cousins to help her pack up the spare room, the one with the black door. I'm not sure why I was fine with it. Maybe I just wanted to see if I had just imagined everything. But she said to wait and to not go up there yet. She told us to keep packing up the rest of the house. A few hours passed, and a car pulled up and 4 men got out. 4 traditional native men. I say this because of what they were wearing. She went in and opened the door before they could knock. They quickly greeted my grandmother, and they disappeared throughout the kitchen. I thought it was a little strange, but I figured they were friends of my grandparents that I hadn't met, and that they were also going to help pack. I was busy helping pack up downstairs when an hour or so later, I saw the men leaving out the front door. They were carrying a big wooden crate that they loaded into their car. My grandma looked out the window for a while after they left, and then told me and my cousins that it was time to pack up the room with the black door. We went inside, and I couldn't believe the difference. I'm not sure if it's because of how much time had passed, but it felt so much better than before. There was still this creepy feeling, but there was no heavy air, no buzzing, no fear. Then I realized the taxidermy animal was gone. I asked my grandmother about it, and she said, "What animal?" I asked if those men took it, and she said, "What men?" And she also wouldn't look me in the eyes as she was answering. I tried again, and I asked, "What happened to the animal, and where did it come from anyways?" She then said, "Everything belonged to your grandfather, and we don't talk about it." She said it in a firm way that really meant that she wasn't going to talk about it, and I could tell she was getting upset, so I just dropped it. So I guess the question that I said that I had from the beginning, what do you all think this was, or what exactly happened? I have now moved on. I am married. I'm in another season of my life, but I do still wonder what exactly this thing was. My grandmother also passed away some time later, so I wasn't able to ask her again. But I also doubt she was going to tell me. Of the countless hours I spent in the woods, it's the one time, the only few seconds that I can't explain. I distance hike whenever I can. Sometimes this means getting up early or staying out late to get as many miles in as possible. Sometimes walking in the pitch dark with a low light headlamp is pretty scary. I grew up in the woods of this area. I slept under the stars more nights than I can count. I have trekked thousands of miles of trail, riverbank, lakeshore, ridge, bogs, and creeks. I have hunted the game. I'm saying this because it's important you understand that I heard, seen, and even smelled about all this region has to offer, in the way of wilderness that is. But the most scariest experience, though, happened at around 4:30 in the morning. It was late spring, so the first morning light wouldn't be visible in the treetops for another 30 to 45 minutes, another hour past that until sunrise. I was on mile 5. I'm in a low bottom that's wedged between 2 steep ridges, muddy and completely hemmed in by thick underbrush, young maple, and some old oak growth. I'm focused on the small light from my headlamp, just one step after the other, zoned out. Then, a loud crack, and I froze solid, This is the part that I have trouble describing. 4:30 in the springtime means I'm the only one making noise. No birds chirping, nothing, just dead quietness. Mid-step I froze. When fight or flight kicks in, you have these instincts kick in. The one that instantly flashed into my mind as I stood there balancing myself into silence was, if I hear that again, I'm turning around and I'm gonna go back the way that I came. Why? Because that sound was not a branch breaking. It wasn't deadfall. It wasn't a widowmaker. I was damn sure I had just heard something intentional. Hearing it twice, well, that means to get out of here. To describe it as best as I can, it sounded like a decent sized wooden stick being whacked against a small tree. More a fungal bat size stick than a baseball bat. Its distinction in my head being that the sound was a crack and not a thud or a thump. And I have described it in the past as explosive because it was so sudden and so fucking loud. I had the sense that it was about 50 yards directly in front of me, and it was loud and clear. Now as I stood there, completely scared, I realized the soon-to-be worst part of my situation. I knew where the sound had came from, and I knew where the trail went. In about 30 yards, I was gonna have to come to a 180-degree turn and start up the ridge going away from the creek. This means that as soon as I got the courage to move towards the noise, I was gonna have to turn my back to it and get up the ridge. This made me very nervous. My head was somewhere between meth fiend murder and Bigfoot. Minutes passed. I just breathed my foggy breath into my glasses and listened. Nothing. Dead quiet. I got about 20 to 30 minutes until first light. I crank up the headlamp and I start to slowly creep up to the 180 turn. By the way, when you wear a headlamp in the woods at night, every tree branch in front of you is casting a big black moving shadow on the trail, so this definitely didn't help. I get to the turn and I quickly make the bend. I'm moving pretty fast at this point, trying to be quiet so I can listen while going up the trail. And then it hit me. I smelled it. A stench hits me that I can't describe. I just imagine wet, rotten death. I actually work scenes where humans have expired in my past life as a firefighter. However, this was like days old, and it just smelled strange. I kept walking fast. By the time that I made the top of that ridge, I was huffing, and the first light was showing. But I didn't stop moving until full light was out, and the birds were chirping again. I heard just about everything in the woods. I smelled it all, but I'm telling you, I'm not sure what the hell that was. If you're indigenous, or even if you aren't, what's your view on Ouija boards? I'm asking because my mom said there's a reason why the elders are the only qualified people to do ceremonies, and even sometimes down to the smudging as well. She told me it's because these ceremonies, well, maybe I shouldn't tell you, but basically she said to never use something that you weren't taught to use, especially when it comes to calling on spirits and mingling with that side of things. I figure I'll give you a background on this before I tell you my personal experience with these things. I do want to warn you, you should most likely smudge after reading this. I know everyone has their own opinion on this, and I get it. This isn't a hill that I'm willing to die on, simply because it comes from Western spiritualism. We natives have our own ways of communicating with spirits, like ceremonies, and dreams, and even prayers. This is after we have been taught and guided on how to do this. But of course there's people in the media who have always portrayed this as fun games to joke with and play with. So I was talking with a buddy of mine last week, and he told me something that made me remember what I went through. He told me that he had played with a Ouija board a few months ago, and he said nothing happened. But he said after a few weeks some weird things started happening. He didn't explain what, but he said those boards are dangerous. It can lie to you and tell you what you want to hear. He said they pretend to be who they are not. He then told me that he didn't want to talk about it. As a matter of fact, He wouldn't even say their name. I get it. I mean, he is the one who told me about it. Other friends have told me in the past that these are nothing but gateways, that they are portals and used by spirits. So all of this made me remember when I was younger, and I was living with my parents at that time. My mom was very traditional, but my dad wasn't. So anyways, I have this friend of mine who can see things, at least that's what he claimed. I think we were both around 15 at this time. So one day he calls me and tells me if we want to play the Ouija board in my house. Me being a skeptic, I said alright. So we got the crew together. It was 3 of us who grew up together out here on the REZ. When he arrived, me and my friend were laughing at him. It wasn't a real one. It was a homemade board, and I didn't believe it was gonna work. He sat at my table and we sat down and started playing. At first when it started to move, I thought it was just him. And to be honest, I think it was him. I don't think there was anything real going on. Our other friend said he didn't want to play no more, and he said he was busy so he had to leave anyway. So we said goodbye, and then we just started playing video games. Towards the afternoon, my friend who had brought the Ouija board ended up going back home. Mind you, everybody stayed a few minutes down the road. At first I was trying not to think about it, but I kept having this feeling that I wasn't alone. But my house is kind of freaky anyway, so I just shrugged it off as a coincidence. I do love all scary things, but I do know the boundary line between what to mess with and how far one can go. At least that's what I thought. So I was reading scary stories online. It was sort of late, and my parents were not home yet, so I was laying in bed reading and watching videos on my phone. I was also texting my buddies on the group chat, and my friend who had left that house earlier, he shared the link to a video. The video was about how these demons had followed this woman after she had played with one of the Ouija boards. I should say that I've seen a lot of scary movies, and I have also read a lot of scary stories, so I can actually handle this, at least I thought. So I'm in my room by myself, no one else is home. Not to mention the lights are off because my dad would always complain about the bill getting too high. But anyways, my buddy, the one who had brought the fake board, said if we could hop on a phone call because he wanted to tell us something. My friend said he couldn't as he was about to shower, and so I ended up calling him. And I was listening to him tell me about that video link that he had sent. I swear, as he was talking to me, I could hear him, but I could also hear other voices in different tones. Thought it was the TV in the background, so I asked what he was watching, and he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I hear those voices in the background," and he was just like, "I don't hear anything." Now at this point I was definitely creeped out, so I told him I had to go, and he said alright that he was gonna message us. As I was about to hang up, my friend said, "Wait." I figured he wanted to tell me something else, so I waited. What he said next was something that I will never forget. He was like, "I know you're there alone, but I'm there with you now." I was already creeped out, but I was definitely now scared. Thought it was him playing a prank on me, except it didn't sound like him. So I just sent a message saying, "What the fuck, dude?" But there was no response. I locked myself in the bedroom at this point, and I started praying. I was scared. When my parents came home, I explained to them everything. My mom was mad, and she asked why I would even bring a Ouija board into the house. She ended up chewing me out. But something that I want to point out is that she told me that she personally doesn't think that these boards themselves have some sort of power to contact. She said it's the intention behind it. She said the energy you give it, you can also just give it to anything else. For example, you quote unquote play with the spirits. You can do that anytime if that's your intention. You don't need a physical Ouija board itself, but with the ones they sell, the main purpose behind them is for evil, even if it's a fake one. You can set bad spirits free. You can even undo certain things that our elders or even ancestors have already dealt with before. And after this happened is when my journey into digging into my own roots and traditions started. Now, I don't play with any of this, and I respect everything much more. Back then, I didn't fully understand what I was doing. I thought it was just about being curious. But what I learned is that there's a reason our people have these rules. There's a reason we have elders, a reason things are taught. Ever since then, I've been more careful. I smudge when something feels off. I also pray. And yes, my mom also ended up getting some guy to come cleanse the house, and all of us as well. My friend who missed out on the action when he went to go shower, he said nothing happened to him. But I still told him that he should tell his parents. Because sometimes it takes months, even years, for something to happen. And my other buddy who was messing with these things, I'm not even sure what happened to him. I do wonder sometimes because they ended up moving, and I didn't hear from him again. This happened during the summer of 2013. I decided it was time to go out and kill some coyotes for their fur. I grabbed my basic AR-15. I liked the way that AK slings attach, so I rigged up my own ratchet sling point on the barrel, slung it over my right side, wrapped it around my neck, messenger style, and I rode my ATV up to this old cabin on the mountain. Once I got there, I took the key out of the ATV and started looking around the area. I had been tossing squirrel and rabbit guts out into the woods for the past few days as bait. When I checked, all the guts were gone, so I knew something had been by. The whole time I was out there, I couldn't shake this weird feeling. You know that feeling when something's just off? Maybe. There's this guy who lives on the mountain, just down the road from the cabin. As I'm thinking about all this, I noticed that he's not there. His car's not there. Right around then, I start thinking that I hear footsteps in the woods. Not mine, but something else shuffling through the grass, just for a split second after each of my own steps. That's when I spot something weird in the distance. It looks like a stick figure almost, skinny, all crooked. It was standing downhill from me a bit, so it was hard to make out. I waved my hand, and as soon as I did that, immediately it darted behind a tree. That's when I thought, oh god, noping the fuck out of here and going back to the cabin. And that's exactly what I did. I sat around for a bit, had a couple of drinks, not enough to get drunk, just enough to take the edge off. I was trying to shake off that creepy feeling from earlier. A few hours go by, it's getting dark, and then I start hearing coyotes yelping off in the distance. At this point I had completely forgotten about the weird thing from earlier. I locked in, waiting on the coyotes. I was outside on the porch with all the lights off, sitting as still as I could, just listening. The yelping started to fade out. Then, out of nowhere, I hear a low voice. It says, "Help me." I looked over towards my neighbor's house and saw that the lights were off. I didn't even notice that he had left. Then I hear it again. "Help me." My first thought was maybe the neighbor had gone into the woods, fallen, broke his leg or something, and with all the bait that I had been tossing out, maybe the coyotes were gonna come in and he was gonna be in trouble. The anxiety hit me fast. I figured I had to go check. I started walking towards the woods and could tell the voice was coming from the ATV trail. So I hopped back onto my ATV, grabbed my AR, and went down the trail. I'm rolling through the dark, and I come up on this U-shaped dip in the path. I didn't hit the brakes. I just coasted through it, and right as I'm in the dip, I hear that voice again, but this time it screams, "Help me." I freaked out. I tried to turn the ATV too fast, and I ended up flipping it. I blacked out for a second. When I came to, I was under the damn thing. It was heavy as hell. I stayed still. I let my eyes adjust to the dark. I started feeling around. My left leg was stuck, and no matter how hard I pushed, I couldn't get it off. It felt like the thing had gained 100 pounds in those few minutes. The sling around my neck told me that I still had my rifle. I pulled it close and realized my arm was bleeding pretty bad. I checked over the gun best I could. Handguard was all jacked up. The stock was cracked, but it still looked like it would fire. At that point I just thought, well, alright, 30 rounds. That should be enough to keep me alive until morning, or until someone finds me. I was dead silent, listening to the forest, but then I heard something shuffling again. Then silence. Total silence. Not even the wind this time. I have never felt fear like I did right then. Every inch of me was screaming. The sound came again. Soft footsteps in the grass. Then I heard the voice again. Help me. And again. Help me. I didn't know if I should respond or just stay quiet. The shuffling kept getting closer. Then something leaned over the ATV, just like someone checking on you if you fell down at a bar. Casual, human-like, but this thing was huge, like 9 fucking feet tall. I was frozen, barely moving, just twitching my fingers and reaching for my gun. I raised it to my shoulder and aimed it towards this thing, whatever it was, without even really looking at it. I didn't want to look, but then the voice came again. Help me, help me. I could feel it getting closer, still looking away, and then something grabbed my face. This was it. I thought I was done. My brain just shut down. I tried to find my trigger finger, but it felt like my body wouldn't move, almost like I was paralyzed. Then it turned my head towards it. I'm face to face with this nightmare, staring into its eyes. It looked like if Gollum from Lord of the Rings had been on meth for 5 years and cut up his face with a knife. Sunken cheeks, deep, lifeless eyes, and its breath. I have never smelled anything that bad in my whole life. That's when I felt the flash of my rifle bump into it, and that's when everything clicked back into place. I remember, I was armed. My brain finally booted up again. I screamed, and it screamed back, loud, like something being tortured. I pulled the trigger, not even aiming at this point, just yanking it again and again. The gun starts going off. My ears are ringing like hell. This thing then grabs me by my hair and starts slamming my head into the dirt, over and over. I'm still shooting, or trying to, but then it rips the gun out of my hands, and it starts beating me with the broken stock of it, just hammering away at me. Then, all of a sudden, lights start flickering through the trees. I was barely conscious, about to black out, when I heard something louder than even its screaming. I swear to God, this thing dropped my gun, and it started screaming and ran off into the woods. My gun hit the dirt maybe 10 feet away from me. The light was still coming towards me, and at that point, I'm not sure if I was being saved, or if I was dying. Then I heard someone shout, "Hold on," and they said my name. Someone tugged on my arm. I turned my head and saw it was the guy who lived down the road. He was holding a massive revolver. I think it was like a Magnum 500. It almost looked like a movie prop. Then I saw him fire again. Whatever that thing was, it dropped, and it started twitching on the ground. I ended up blacking out. I woke up in the hospital with a ton of stitches in my head, and all over my body as well. When I finally got out, I asked my neighbor what he saw that night. He just shrugged and said, "It was just a bear. Don't worry about it. We get them around here all the time." I looked at him like he was crazy. I'm not convinced I got beat half to death with my own rifle by a fucking bear. I moved down to the lower eastern part of Idaho with my wife and my 1-year-old daughter. They are part of the Shoshone-Bannock tribe in Fort Hall, Idaho. So our home is kind of like in the middle of nowhere. Nothing but land and hills surrounding us. We have a few neighbors around, but that's about it. We live right in front of a small butte, small enough to walk up in about 20 minutes. Mind you, I have never lived on the REZ. You know, I'm a city native here. But when I first moved in, I never even thought about skinwalkers or deer women. Nothing like that. I never experienced anything like that in my life. So when my wife would tell me about stories about things that she's seen or heard, I would never believe her. I never believed in any of that. until this one night that changed everything. It was in the middle of winter. Me and my wife got into a heated argument, and I can say that we chose peace, but I still went for a walk, even though she told me not to be out at night. I wanted to piss her off by doing it anyways, so I walked by myself to the butte. It was about 7:30 p.m. The sky was dark, and it was also cold, so there was nothing but me and my thoughts. As I was walking up the hill, I kept feeling like someone was watching me. I had an eerie feeling the whole time that I'm walking, and then I come up to a few big boulders. As I'm ready to turn back and go home, that's when I started to hear voices. Voices that mimic my wife and baby. That's when I hear the voice of my wife, screaming, "Help us, help our baby. Our baby is choking. She can't breathe. Babe, help." And I also hear what sounds like a baby choking. I turned around where the voice was coming from. I pointed my flashlight, and there it was. Right in front of me, I saw them. Two of them. Tall, pale white figures. The faces, they were ugly. No mouth. Big dark hole as eyes. No nose, just nostrils. I see them as they keep trying to draw me using the voice of my wife. I'm almost convinced that my wife was near, but my instincts kicked in, and I took off running home so fast. I didn't stop because I felt like they were following me, but I was still in fear of looking back. So when I finally got home, I went inside, locked the door, and went to my room. They were there. My wife was singing to our daughter while she was putting her in her cradle board. I couldn't believe it. It felt like a bad dream. I told her what happened, and my wife immediately got to smudging me, and she also made me throw my clothes out. It felt like a nightmare. After that, I started to hear what sounded like owls outside our house every night. I would also hear some sounds on my roof like moving. I could also hear thuds outside my house. I prayed, I smudged, until it finally went away. But after that night, I never went outside after the sun went down again. I learned my lesson. So when they tell you not to go outside, you should listen.